services in houses, and we do commercial too. So that's basically what I'm doing right now with them. And well, they try to help people out down here to have everything according with the code in their houses, because there's a bunch of people down here that they don't have any protection in their houses. And
Yeah.
well, it's just like you're like a salesperson too, so when you go in the house, you do the work, but you also offer up some other stuff to the customer to protect their house, like surge protectors and stuff like that.
Well, we do that everywhere. That's a code requirement now in residential.
Yeah, man.
Of course, Florida's still on the 2017. So
they are. Mm.
But and they are into it definitely. When they make their code changes, they take a while, but when they do it, they go in it. I have a lot of friends. I'd be living down in Florida if I wasn't in Texas. I got a friend of mine that actually lives down there in Port St. Lucie, who's an amazing guy. And I fell in love with that area down there. He would hate to have me as a neighbor, though. Boy, we'd never get nothing done. But I could live in Florida. That's one of the places I like down there.
Yeah, I met with one of them inspector down here in Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
He know the code.
Are they very, very, very well versed down there?
Yeah, it was very good.
What was his name?
I don't remember.
It's in Florida. Ask him if he knows me. Probably chances are I don't know him, but he asked him if he knows me. He probably does.
Oh, your name? Yeah. They probably do.
So.
There's a lot of folks down here that they like to study the code,
Oh yeah, well that's big. The big IAEI is a big chapter down there in Florida. That's they got that. Of all the IAEI is a kind of a dying association, although I believe it's probably going to get some bump from the ICC, but it's.
I brought it up your name in one of our meeting down there because there's some folks down there, they're learning, and I told them to get on the internet and look up for your name, and see they can get in the program too.
Sure, we have all new stuff coming for 2022: design, layout. Some interesting stuff. I even got something today that's going to be creating tutorials for people to help find all the features and everything. So it's going to be awesome. So found that out just today.
That's good, man. That's a lot of people. They're looking for knowledge too.
Absolutely. And all of our programs and moving forward in 2022 are all going to be certification programs. So you'll earn certifications through it.
That's good.
So
that's going to be good for them.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we're going to get started here. And if anybody, again, I think some people probably would have saw that I was, what did we say, Jay, that I was going to probably be 8 o'clock?
Yeah, but I got the notifications like on the YouTube and things like that you just sent out.
Okay, so it went out. So because I ended up getting back in time to be able to do it. So and over on the stream,
when's Kicking It with the King going to premiere?
Kicking It with the King. You know what? Kicking It with the King podcast is now all on the Grunberg shoulders, right? So he's going to have to step up now and produce it. I'm just saying.
Kind of tonight, you kind of, without me instructing or you're kind of seeing Kicking It with the King right here,
there you go. That's Kicking It with the King right there. Definitely. That is definitely.
Don't forget to record, Paul.
Oh, no, I will get recording on tonight. So how's the audio? Sound okay?
Yeah,
sound good.
Okay. Not overmodulated, too loud?
No, sound good.
Okay, good. They say it's got to be turned up over on the internet, but again, I probably can't control that over there. So, anywho, hopefully they can hear me. Turn up your volume. Best I'm gonna get it probably tonight because I don't want to blow these guys out. And again, this is all about the members that are in the Fast Trax program. Those are on the internet, can't see them. You can hear them, but you can't see them. And but they'll be chiming in, and so but yeah, I'm waiting for the kicking it with the king as well. So we'll see how that works out.
No pressure, Jay.
No pressure. Yeah, that's right. No pressure at all, bro. I mean, I will only scrutinize it a little, just some saying, because I need more content for electrical blunders. So whatever you do, just kind of feed me that content. All right. So
how can you blunder a podcast?
That's true. I mean, I would have to listen to it and go, did he really say that? All right. So. All right. Well, I will record it, but we're going to get started because we're going to do Q&A tonight, and hopefully, now Tim, you sent me something. So you're gonna early next year, you're gonna be starting in another series of preparing for exams again. What'd you say, Florida?
Eddie.
North Carolina.
That's right. That's right. North Carolina. Oh yeah, well there you go. You have some good ones there because they tend to take their exams pretty proud too. So see how that but I have no doubt you'll nail that. All right, let's go on and I will go on and start sharing the screen here. Hold on with me. Let me go on and get that set up here. Share, and you guys let me know, or Jay, whoever, let me know y'all can see the screen. Can y'all see the questions on the screen?
Mine's still loading.
Still loading?
There we go.
Okay, yeah, I just got the notice popped up, says they can see your application. All right, so that was a little delay. So people over on the web, over on the streams, the live streams, have seen this question up for a while now. Sadly, folks, over on the live stream, I don't interact. Jay chooses to interact sometimes, but again, I'm focused on the Fast Trax, focused on this. So, but hopefully you can listen along and you get something out of tonight's lesson. So as we normally do, I will actually what we'll do is if you have any questions on anything you're working on, we'll save that to the end and we'll just get into it so we can get some lookups and some code questions. As always, if you know the answer, give me your code reference as well. And we're not going to show the code on the screen, so it encourages you to get your code book. And we're going to look at possible, as we always do, those that aren't familiar, how we dissect a question and we look in the index to see what's in there and what's not in there. Again, it's a method to the madness, but you learn what the index can help you with and what it just can't help you with. And also, for many of you that have been coming to these things that we do, there's some of these questions that you'll be able to just answer right away. Remember the old 3-wave method that we have, and you can watch that on the internet. That is still one of the few things that I have for free up on our, I'm a sellout, as people will tell you, up on our YouTube channel. You can watch the 3 waves method on how you do the different waves in order to be able to, how you answer questions during an exam. What's different in this when we do these training sessions, and there will be a change, by the way, to the way Wednesday nights go in the future. And there'll be a tutorial on that too available for you to watch, a kind of mini course. We're going to have a bunch of mini courses that are going to be on the website coming up in 2022. There's going to be a tutorial on all, because people have questions about, so what's this thing about the Fast Trax Black, the Fast Trax Red, the Fast Trax Green, Fast Trax Blue, Fast Trax Yellow, Fast Trax Purple, Fast Trax Orange. What does all that mean? And so we will have tutorials up there that'll explain each one of them and the benefits and what they can do for students and why you'd be interested in them. So that way it helps us answer those questions. But I will tell you, you folks that are in the Fast Trax program, that doesn't change. Whether it's the Fast Trax Black is the same as what you're in right now. There's no difference, right? Except for other support that we'll be giving to the Black. And in 2022, there are certifications for all of our courses. So you complete the course, you go through the course and you maintain a 70% and higher, then you'll get a certificate of completion at the end. and you get the opportunity to get multiple certifications, which you can use for marketing. You can use it for your company. You can use it for promotions, whatever. And it's all going to be recorded and kept here at our corporate office so it can be validated. The certificate that you'll get will be validated and it'll be frameable. It'll have a code that you can use. So if you put it on a resume, they can verify that it was certified and all this kind of stuff. So that's some of the things we have going on for the 2022. Unfortunately, those that are in existing programs, since they aren't certification programs, they don't transfer because you've probably already done a lot of the grading already. And so you have to have a fresh grading to be able to do it. And again, people say, well, why did I do this? Well, because you probably took the course in order to pass an exam. This is just, and so that's still what's relevant. But there's a lot of people that want to take our other courses. So the Black is your base course like we have here. It's exam prep and NEC learning, 30,000 foot view. But the Fast Trax Red, the Fast Trax Green, the Fast Trax Blue, and all those are specifically broken down to get more knowledge on residential, more knowledge on commercial, more knowledge on industrial, more knowledge on grounding and bonding. Those are the ones that are pretty much going to be geared towards certification programs. Most people are going to use the Black program like y'all do to prepare for an exam. So I have other people that use this for their company in order to get everybody on the same page. So, but they would want certification probably to use in their marketing and stand out amongst the rest or whatever they do with it. They would have access to something like that after the first of the year. Anyway, we'll have tutorials explaining it all if you're interested or you know anybody that's interested. Ultimately, we're trying to put together with other stuff that we haven't released yet, a fully comprehensive program that's unlike anything else out there. So that's the whole goal. And if it all works and the stars align, 2022 will be the year that all takes place. So we're constantly working on it. I'm sucking Jay into this and to be a part of it and just hopefully just make it better and better and better. I just don't like the idea of people buying books or buying DVDs and spending a fortune and there's no accountability for it. No competency, no testing, no sessions like we do on Wednesday nights. It just seems like there's a better way to spend money. And that's what we're trying to create. Also on the Wednesday nights, it's not going to be dedicated to just exam prep. Although it's going to be all of the Fast Trax systems, red, the blue, the green, whatever. They're free to come in here. But a lot of times we will be talking about exam prep or code questions because at the end of the day, this is less about exam prep. It's more about what? Learning code. And so the codes are going to apply to no matter what program you're in because they're all NEC based to teach you the codes within that specific realm, whether it's residential, commercial, but they're all codes. And for you people that do exam, that's a wonderful thing because you really don't care. All you want is to get as much code as you can get. So that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to have videos specifically geared towards the different tracks and they're going to be in the program. So again, there's a lot of stuff, but you'll see tutorials coming up probably in the next couple weeks and it'll explain everything in the program. God, you're so good, Mike. And you beat Jay to the punch. Look at that. See, you got to up your game, Jay. All right, so let me go on and do that. Let me record.
I was gonna wait until
I was over with it.
Until you were done with your thing, but hey,
And Michael's up in you now.
Mike's
Recording in progress.
All right, so kind of do an intro, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday night session of the Fast Trax system. Tonight we're going to be doing some questions and answers and dissecting and looking up code questions. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And that's the whole process tonight of this is to kind of dig into the Fast Trax Black program and talk a little bit about how to look up a code question. And if you're not familiar with this is where we dissect it and we beat the question to death. That's the goal. Beat the question to death and look at all the possible ways to answer this question. Okay. All right. So the people online have been looking at this question for a while. You folks have seen it now. So we're going to answer this question and we're going to dissect it. Again, as always, if you know the answer, give me the answer and support it with a code reference. And we'll all go look it up. and we'll see how we can find all the possible answers here. The goal is to keep you moving through the code. That's what we want to do. Okay, so all right, general purpose 125 volt receptacle outlets installed in bathrooms of hotels or motels must be blank. Number 1, GFCI protected. Number 2, on a separate dedicated 20 amp rated branch circuit. Is the answer both 1 and 2? Neither 1 and 2? Number 1 only? Or number 2 only? Give me your answer and give me your code reference. And I know, Michael, you have it already because you've been sitting there watching it for a while. What is it? Let's go. Let's go. Let's get it. Let's do it. Let's exam prep. Tell me where we go. Somebody tell me where they think we would go.
So all I could find is that it has to be GFCI protected. I couldn't find nothing about it being dedicated 20.
Okay.
Whereas GFCI goes, I got reference for 210.8.
Oh, let me get my little. Hold on, let me. Oops, hold on. I'm spilling everything over here. Let me get my little scratch. I gotta have some scratch pad. I gotta have some scratch paper.
All right, that's for kitchens. It's 210.8 B1.
210.8 B1. That's the bathrooms. Okay. All right. So of these answers, we know that at least we know GFCI protection, right? We know that part, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the next question, I guess, is the part about is, and again, also when we're looking at these questions, we're also trying to see whether or not the author of these questions is incorrect. Okay, that's all part of it. So there's about 7 or 8 questions in these bundles that come with these. They're DeWalt questions, and we just put them to the online so you can replicate taking an exam. And also, I should say, these are the master finals. So these are the ones where typically when you get down to the last 2 weeks before you're preparing for an exam, these are the ones that you're going to put your 2-minute timer on, or 2.5 minute, depending on your test. And you're going to time yourself, right? So the deal here is we're not doing that here. Here, we're dissecting it and discussing the questions and trying to learn from the questions. So Michael has identified the fact that it's, that it does have to be GFCI protected. So we established that one. So the next question is, again, is required to be on a separate 20 amp rated branch circuit. Interesting about that is if it was a dwelling unit, that would be an easier question, wouldn't it, Mike? I mean, that would be easier because 210.11 C3 tells me that that bathroom has to be on a what? At least one 20 amp branch circuit, right?
That's right.
So when it comes to, for this is a hotel and motel. First of all, there is no requirement, I believe, to even have a branch circuit to any 125 in a bathroom in other than dwellings, right? It's not a requirement. So one of the things so this looks like it would be one only, right?
That's what I'm gonna go with.
All right, we'll go with it. There you go. And that's the reference that we gave. That does not apply to hotels and motels. Ironically enough, folks, it would apply to the individual dwelling unit or the individual hotel or motel room if it was in, but if it's a dwelling unit, then it would apply to a dwelling unit, but it would not apply to, let's say, in general, the general purpose type of application here. And these are not dwelling units. These are dealing with the hotels and motel applications. I used to have a lot of people say that when I go into commercial buildings and they had a branch circuit that was in the bathroom. Now they got to be GFCI protected, but nothing gave us any direction on that circuit that was in there. But we did know it had to be GFCI protected, right? So when it comes to the bathroom, only going to apply to dwelling units. Not going to apply to anything other than dwelling units as far as requiring a dedicated 20 amp. In reality, it is probably going to be a 20 amp, but just in general.
How about
right.
210.60.60?
210.60. All right, let's look at it. 210.60. 210. What cycle are you in, by the way?
2020.
2020. All right, let's look at 2020. It says 210.60. It says guest rooms, guest suites, dormitory units, and similar occupancy. It says guest rooms and guest suites in hotels and motels, sleeping rooms in dormitory and similar occupancy shall have receptacle outlets installed in accordance with 210.52A and D. Okay, that's the receptacles itself, right? So that's the receptacle outlets. Guest rooms and guest suites provided with permanent provisions for cooking shall have the other provisions. So that's all pushing to 210.52, which is placement rules. And of course, B in 210.60 is the placement. That's how you have the number. You can have the total number. Only 2 of the receptacle outlets have to be readily accessible. The other ones can be just in the room. So that's a number thing. It's kind of like meeting room application. So yeah, so nothing in 210.60 is going to drive us to that.
Well, that requires us to have one in the bathroom.
Well, but it doesn't say anything about the circuit. That the 210.11C3 only applies to dwelling units. So I'm guessing it can be supplied by any circuit you want.
Gotcha.
The other aspect of in here is 210.52, and if we look at that, just to craps and giggles, if we look at 210, this is dealing with, and let me see, where were we at? That was, get off my page here. So 210.60, let's see. It was telling us 210.52A through D, and 210.52A, B, C, and D is the bathrooms. And so D is at least one receptacle outlet shall be installed in bathrooms within 3 feet. But this is all about the outlet itself. I can smell a code change that should have been probably submitted to that. But what tells me is in that room, it's not telling me that I have to have the dedicated branch circuit to that receptacle outlet like we have to have it in 210.11C3. Okay, so it tells me that I can put it on with the other circuits if I wanted, but it still has to be GFCI protected. So I think most of us will probably put it on a circuit by itself anyway, wouldn't we? Most people would. But it doesn't give us the direction in the code to tell us that. It tells us about the outlet, but it doesn't tell us about the circuit that feeds the outlet. Always interesting to look at that way. All right. Next question. All right. We got a given question. All right. So let me get the back up on my screen here. All right. Let's see here. Thank you again over on the chats. Appreciate it. Thank you, King, for keeping up with that for me. I appreciate it. All right. So given. After all demand factors, okay, important statement. After all demand factors have been given in consideration for an office building. Okay, so everything has been considered, right? There's Sean. Fashionably late. No, he's probably not. He saw the notice about 8 o'clock. So Sean's gonna jump all on me. He's gonna say, I thought y'all said it was 8. I'm sorry, Sean. Sorry in advance. I got back early and decided to go with regular time. All right, so my bad. It's all me. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's read this again. After all demand factors have been taken into consideration for an office building, the demand load is determined to be 90,000 VA. The building has a 120 to 40 volt single phase electrical system, okay, where the service entrance conductors are to be installed in buried rigid Schedule 40 PVC conduit. What minimum size copper conductors with THHW insulation, and I don't, don't like that at all either. So give me a second, because that's one of those. Yuck. All right, so we'll go with it. Nobody makes that, by the way. With minimum size copper conductors with THHW insulation are required for the underground line service lateral conductors. Okay. So again, a lot of language in here. I prefer, because they call them service entrance conductors. Then it talks about and says underground line service lateral conductors. So I don't like the phrasing of this. To me, these are probably service entrance conductors underground and not necessarily service lateral, because all of us in the know that chances are we haven't got nothing to do with service laterals. That's going to be sized by the utility, and we ain't got no say in that. So we're going to assume these are talking about service entrance conductors underground. And I saw you, Schwartzy, come in. Sorry about that. Thank you for coming. All right. So let's kind of work this out. So all demand factors have been taken. Everything's been done. So it said, this question, people start to thinking, well, we got to do a bunch of stuff. What do we know? We know it's 90,000 VA. We know it's a 122 40 volt system, right? Only thing we're limited to is this limitation to conductors, but it is THHW, so we can do some looking up, some chats in here.
400 kc mil.
Well, that's not one of your options here. So we got options on the screen: 350 kc mil, 500 kc mil, 400 kc mil, 300 kc mil. You say 400. All right. So as a lesson that I use with this, if you ever are in an exam or you're ever in a situation where you're like, okay, I can do Watt's law, right? I can figure this thing out. But you ask yourself, okay, I need to figure out first what's that THHW insulation. Now, other things to remember, that it's coming in installed, buried underground, right? It's buried. So that's a wet location. So we got THHW, which is obviously wet location. So the first thing that I like to do, and again, if you're in the 2020 NEC, is, and again, we're studying these to examine it, is I'm going to go to 310.4. And if you're in the 2017, you're going to go to 310.104. And I'm looking for TH, and I'm doing this to introduce you to this table. This nice table that lets you know all the different types of trade names for the thermal insulation, ratings, wet location, dry location, so that if you're looking at a question like this, you're saying, well, it's THHW, that's 2 H's, that's 90. But wait, if you look at THHW, you'll see that it's 75 in the wet and 90 in the dry. Well, this question, and we'll see whether it's right or wrong, but this question says that it's coming in buried, schedule 40 PVC. So,
I got it
wet.
wrong.
Yeah, hold on. Yep, so that's it. Did you go with the 90? Huh? So we'll go 75. Sorry, so let's look at it this way. So the first thing we got to do is what do? We got to do 90,000, right? And we're going to divide that by 240, right? It's 375. So then I'm going to go to... Yep, and then we're going to go to 310.16 or 310.15B16 if you're in the 2017. At some point, I'm not going to have to ever say that again. I can't wait. Where I can just say 310.16 and that's it. Now, it's copper. So we're going to go into and we're going to be in the 75 degree. Why? Because it's THHW in the wet location. If it was a dry location, they were using THHW, then you see that THHW is also listed in 310.16 in that table as well under the 90. Well, we could do that if it was a dry location. But when we looked at 310.4 or 310.104 in the 2017 code, we saw that THHW is being used in a wet location is 75. So we're going to look down here and see that it looks like we're going to need a 500 kc mil. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go with Edgar. Because Edgar threw a number out there, everybody. He threw 400 out there. He was so committed to it. He was like, that's going to be fun. No, I'm going to discourage people from participating when I do this, Edward. I'm not, Edgar. I don't want to do that. But we're going to choose that for Edgar and see what he's got here. Oh, Edgar. What happened? So
Screw it up.
there you go. So that's the reason we did this, is to show how important it is. And this can happen just that quick. Is you heard the old saying when we say about these things, what do we always say? We say, you see 2 H's, you think high heat, you think 90, right? You see the T, you think thermoplastic. You see the W, you think wet. But the reality is, and this is just like XHHW-2, by the way, so good lesson is if you don't see that -2 after the W, then if it's a wet location, remember, it doesn't matter if it's got 2 H's, you're going to be in the 75-degree column. If you see that -2 and it's behind that W like that, then you know that you're in the 90-degree column, at least for adjustment and correction purposes. Okay. So in this case, there was no adjustments. There was no corrections. We had no reason, and we couldn't have gone to 90 because it's wet anyway. So we were stuck foundation. We're smack dab in 75-degree. And for those, as you see in the program, it's going to give you the code references and the links and how to get there. And it gives an example of what we did. And here the note, 500 kcml conductors with an ampacity of 380 should be selected. So Edgar. Come on now. They get pretty sharp down there in Florida. So you're going to step it up. You guys step it up.
I will never forget now. From now on.
There you go.
Quick question on that one.
Yes.
Could the 83% rule be applied on that, or?
No, you weren't given any variables in that to use that as an example. We weren't given enough. We weren't given all the variables in that to apply it. But to answer, the short answer to that question is, if you're given all the variables, so it falls between, well, let's think about that. So that was a question that was asking based on the content that was given. But let's translate that to real world, because we don't know that question supplied 100% of the load. We don't know all those things. But let's assume it did, Mike. So it was between 100 and 400. Check. It was a 122 40 volt, right? Check. It says it was service conductors underground, so we can let's assume that it could actually handling the entire load. So the answer on an exam, if you get a question like that, in the real world, yes, we could apply the 83% as long as we meet all the factors that are in 310.12, or for those that are in the 2017 code, 310.15b7. So great observation, Mike, because again, the thing about an exam question that wants you to use 310.12, they're going to give you a lot of information to reach, because they're trying to get you to that answer. But that one was just a simple, straightforward type of question. Anyway, but incidentally, if it was using 310.12, what would that have been?
I was going to go with 350.
Well, here's the other problem with that question, right? They didn't give you the service rating. So remember, 310.12, it says right in the beginning, it says it's based on the service rating. We weren't given that in the question, so we don't assume. Now, if it had said 400 amp service or 350 or 300, then that would have been enough variables. And think about that when you're doing an exam question. They're going to give you, because they can't afford on an exam that's being monitored by the state, they can't afford to be wishy-washy. They have to try to give you as much information as you need. Otherwise, what should you always do on an exam? If y'all have been trained up now, y'all are savvy at this stuff. If you see a question that just doesn't give you the variables, what has always been my recommendation to do before you leave that test center? Contest the question.
Right.
Let them know that you disagree. Write it on your scratch paper and go, this question here is BS. I'm contesting it. Because the worst that can happen is that they say, no, it's right, you're wrong, you don't get it. The best that could happen is, and I've seen it happen, is they'll throw out the question. Especially if you can show that it's an ambiguous type of question, that it's written poorly. So, so again, now don't get wild and crazy on that, because I can see somebody else saying, well, this guy said that 30 of these 100 questions are not, you're not going to get that. You might get a couple that are like in ours, over 800 questions in our program. You're going to get about 8 that are a little wonky, but they make you look it up. They make you learn from it. And if you're at the point now where you look at a question and you go, dude, that question's full of crap, then that's a milestone. You're able to identify a crappy question, right? So
Yeah, I had one of those.
Is it the 83% just for dwelling units?
yeah, and I don't know if that one said, it won't let me go back, but I don't know if that one said anything about dwellings, single
Thought it
family
was an
dwellings.
office building.
Was that one an office building?
I believe so.
Oh yeah, because we used 90,000, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we used 90.
Oh, that's right. Good
Yeah,
call.
so that good call. So the office building wouldn't matter. But all massively good discussions, because if you get something, make sure you look for all the elements that can determine whether or not you can even apply it or the rule or not. So great call. I wasn't even paying attention. And the thing about this is, once I go forward, this thing won't let you go backwards. I'm sure any of y'all experienced that yet. It's always moving forward. It will not let you go backwards to look at previous question that you answered, unfortunately. So I should probably spend more time on a question. That way we can look more deeper in it. All right, let's do the next one. Good call. Great. Office not going to apply. If it hadn't have said that in it, it still wouldn't have applied, because it didn't give us a service rating. Let's see. Now, in the real world, if that was a dwelling and we did the calculation like it showed us, and we came up with 375 or whatever the value that we came up with was, 375, then we know that would have been on a 400 amp overcurrent device, as long as the load didn't exceed 375 or whatever the rating is of that, or 380 is what our conductor ampacity was. Then we could go to the next size, right? 240.4B allows it. So then we could have picked the service rating, which is whatever that would be, like a 400 amp device. Then we could have gone to 310.12. But again, you're right. It has to be a dwelling unit to do that. Great. It's a lot of info there. Where else are you going to get that info? You're going to get that info reading a book. That's a good discussion. Okay. Glad y'all joined in. All right. Next one. Y'all have had time to read this one, I'm sure. When a receptacle outlet is removed from an underfloor raceway, the conductors supplying the outlet shall be removed from the raceway, capped with an approved insulated material, marked and identified, taped off with red colored phase tape. Now, you could probably do processes of elimination here, but one of the key things here is, what are we dissecting?
Underfloor Raceway.
All right, so what do we got in the index? We're going to first venture into our index. If you're on an exam and you already know this question, you can answer it. You save yourself some time and you move on. If you're a little wishy-washy on it, you still think I'm about 75% right on it, you can check it off on your exam in your first wave. But up in the right, usually on all the tests that you do online and these PSIs and all, you can still mark the questions. So again, you're building some time, but if there's one that you're like, oh, dude, I'm not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. I think I got it right, but I'm gonna mark it so I don't forget to not mark it. But I want to come back and look at it later. So go on and just mark it and do that. All right. So if you go in the back, do we have any underfloor, anything in the back? All right, we have underfloor raceways. It's in Article 390, right?
Yes, sir.
And is there anything in here that's in this question that's going to help us here? So this is talking about receptacle outlets. And so it says conductors, ampacities, number of raceways, coverings, insertion, laid string. But what is one of the rules that I always say when you take a quick glance at this and you notice that there's not but a couple sections in it? It's easier to do what immediately? It's easier to just go to
scan.
go to 390 and start scanning when it's literally not a whole lot of sections within that one. So 390 is small. So the easiest thing to do, and what are we identifying? We're looking for the key tracers, the identifiers, receptacle outlets, things like that. That's what we're looking
Yep.
for. So let me go to 390. So on an exam, if I was doing that and I went to that Underfloor Raceways, and Jay likes to use the front contents to do that because he identifies that as one of the code articles. But if you go to the back and you had saw how small that was, your mind would have said, forget that, Jack. I'm going straight to 390. And if you look at it, what is it? It's basically 2 columns. That's it, right?
Yep.
All right, let's see if we're getting. So I'm scanning it. I'm looking to see if it says anything about receptacles in here because there's no guarantee that it is, right? It might not be in here. It still might be up in something like 406 or something. So we have to look and see what it's in. We're just all right. Discontinued outlets. Okay, so the word discontinued doesn't appear anywhere in here, but that's essentially what's happening, right? It's removed. So it says, what's the code section?
390.57.
Yep. It says discontinued outlets. When an outlet is abandoned, discontinued, or removed, the section of the circuit conductor supplying the outlet shall be removed from the raceway. No splices or re-insulated conductors, such as would be the case with abandoned outlets on loop wiring, shall be allowed in raceways. So basically it's saying what?
Take it out. Rip that
Take it
bad
out.
boy out of it.
Shall be removed. No capping, no re-identifying, and that type of thing. So
Take it to the scrapyard.
take it to the scrapyard. Now, if you're in the 2017 code, that was 390.8. And we're at 3. So that's a benefit. That's one thing I do like about them, whether there's a couple questions that are, janky in the thing. I do like it, that the fact that it does give you both the 17 and 2020, especially for folks that are migrating from one to the other. I think it is beneficial so that they do that. They could have just given you all just 2020 and you're like, well, crap, what was it in the 2017? That type of thing. And the 2017 program gives you 2014 and 2017. So there's always a double overlap. And as we work on the 2023 program, when that's all finalized, and there's some wacky crap going on with the code in 2023, I can tell you if any of you listen to my latest podcast. But we'll see how that works out. But anyway, so there's your answer. Remove it, rip it out. Good job. Anybody got any other questions on this before I go? Because I can't come backwards. I got to keep moving forward. It's a straightforward one. Okay. All right. Next question. Determine the minimum size 75 degrees C rated conductors required to supply a 25 horsepower, 208 volt, 3-phase design C fire pump motor. Wow, that's a lot. Okay. So what's rolling around in your mind, right? So
430.
yeah, you're thinking, okay, I'm thinking 430. I'm thinking, okay, I'm got a size. It's asking me about the conductor. Then I'm thinking, oh, what's this fire pump thing kicking in? You're asking me about this fire pump. So talk me through it. What we're gonna do? While y'all are looking this up, Jacob over on the screen, I saw over on the chat, I saw we had 500 kc milk. Great job. Again, we talks about terminal lugs. Again, typically, if it's over 100, you're going to be 75. Under 100, I use 100 as the bridge, but it says 100 and less, and over is 60. In our case, that was clearly 75 degree at the 75 degree column, so we're good, and so should be all right. So anyway, let's get back to this one. All right. What do we got to do first? I'm sorry. I cut somebody.
695.
All right. Well, 695. So it's talking about the fire pump motor. So we're talking about the conductors to the fire pump motor. So let's do that. Let's go to 695. And this is specifically to the fire pump motor. I'll let you go that direction first. No, it's a motor, but we'll let you go that direction first. And so are you bold scanning? Is that what you're doing? Or did you go to the back?
Nah, I just throw out the article number for fire pumps.
Okay. So 695. Now, while we're here in 695, real quick, I will go on and look at the index because I turned the thing open right to the answer. But let's go look real quick under fire pumps and see what you might have under there so that you know, look, am I going to have the term fire pump in the index? And if I am, is that going to be the one holy grail? Okay, to 695. So if I've got to go to 695 for the fire pumps, is that going to be it? Is that the place where I go? So let's go to 695. I'll actually go to the index and look up fire pump and see what's in there. See if there's anything. Okay, so there's 695 for fire pumps. And see what we have for the, so there's power wiring. And again, that is to the fire pump, right? So let's see over in the chat real quick while you're looking that up down there. Oh, I see David says it's 695. Yeah. David, are you one of those guys that always look for somebody on the stream to accidentally say something? I'm just teasing you, David. All right. So in 695, let's go down and then we're looking at under the index 695.6. Now that's power wiring. So that's going to be where I want to be when it comes to that. So I'm going to look over and go back to 695. Now dot 6 is power wiring. And I'm scanning, and you'll notice that we get to 695.6, and it looks like B, right? And it says fire pump motors and other equipment. It says conductor supplying a fire pump motor, pressure maintenance pump, and associated fire pump accessories equipment shall have a rating not less than 125% of the sum of the fire pump motor and pressure maintenance motor, full load current, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It didn't ask us all that stuff. So the next one is B2, says fire pump motors only. And that's all it's given us into this question, right? So B2 says, conductor supplying only a fire pump motor shall have a minimum ampacity in accordance with 430.22. Okay, and remember 430 is the motors. Dot 22 is about a single motor and how we size conductors for a single motor. Okay, we're not doing multiple motors here because it wasn't in the question. Single motor. All right. And it says it shall comply with the voltage drop requirements of 695.7. So is that going to come into play? All right. So what do we do is right now, the first thing that we're going to do is that we have a 25 horsepower, 280 volt, 3-phase design C motor, fire pump motor, right?
Yep.
So let's go on and go into 430. We go to the back of the 430. Let's see what we're going to get as far as the FLC for this fire pump motor.
Would it be the last chart? That's the only time I get kind of confused.
No, that one's you mean 251? 430, 251?
Yes, B.
So that's lock rotor. That's for the disconnecting means selection, not what we're going to do for the motor. So for
That's
arcade,
what throws me off when a question says a design C or B, and that chart specifies B, C, and D.
yes,
The other ones don't exactly.
yeah, but but again, this is maximum motor lock rotor currents in amperes, 2 and 3 phase design B, C, and D. But this conversion table, polyphase design B, C, and D, maximum lock rotor currents for selection of the disconnecting means and controllers as determined from horsepower. So, I'm thinking for the most part, we'll see how this one lays out. But at the end of the day, I'm thinking it's not imperative for us to worry too much about the design C aspect of this.
Gotcha.
And let's try to work it through the motors. Okay.
Okay.
I'm just teasing you, David. Over on the stream there. So let's do this real quick though. Let's see what we've got. Let's look at 25 horsepower under. This is obviously 3-phase. So we're gonna work with.
Throw it up again.
Go ahead.
Number
Edgar.
three. Number three.
You mean 2 AWG or 3 AWG? The sizing.
3 AWG.
Okay, you're gonna go with
Yep.
3 AWG. So I'm gonna mark
agree.
you. All right, we got 2 agreements there. Okay, so let's first go here. 208 volts, 25 horsepower. Everybody can agree that's 74.8, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's 74.8. Now we say it's 75-degree rating. Now,
And
We
know it's a
also-
motor.
hold on. We also have to remember, let's jump back to 695. Keep that in mind. And let's see if y'all did this. You probably did. It's based on the size you're picking. Go back to 695.
Well,
Now-
wouldn't it be
Hold on.
regardless that it says that? It's
Well,
still
hold-
a motor.
Yeah, but it also says, okay. But in 430.22, it said what? Well, hold on. First, before we do that, let's go to 695.7 real quick. Just go to 695.7.
Okay.
Let's go there first. So what does that say? It says the voltage of the fire pump controller line terminal shall not drop more than 15% below the normal controller rated motor under motor starting conditions. And then the running says the voltage at the load terminals of the fire pump controller shall not drop more than 5% below the voltage rating of the motor connected to those terminals when the motor is operating at 150% of the full load current rating of the motor. So these are voltage drop, but again, it's poorly what it's asking in the question for conductor sizing, because here it's talking about whether or not it's starting or it's running. So the worst case scenario is it's got to be able to start, right? So the voltage, and this is a voltage question, and we're asking for a conductor, so we're trying to find a conductor for rating. So this is a voltage drop. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that might not play into the question. Of course, I could be wrong. Been wrong before. So 430.22 is where we're going to go look at as well, because it made a reference to it. And to be honest with you, I'm not given any voltage aspects up here other than 208 volts. So we'll see what the question's intention is trying to get. But I'll go to 430.22. And what does that say? It says 125% of the full load current, right?
Yep.
So that was 74.8 times 1.25, right?
Yep.
93.5. Is that what y'all got?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to go to 310.16 or 310.15B16 for you folks that are in that cycle. One day I'm going to not have to again say that anymore. Going to the 75 degree. And again, does it say copper? Doesn't say, but you always assume copper, right?
Yep.
All right. And it looks like that would pump it into 3. So Edgar might redeem himself here. So we're going to go 3. And so the portion, so this is important. This question never said anything about voltage drop. We did that as a lesson, right? But we identified that is the voltage drop at the controller for the running and start. No variable in here. Didn't have any rule here. We went and looked at 430.22 because it did make a reference to that based on what our question is. And that's what gave us the 125%. You could have said, I don't see enough stuff in here at all to make me even want to go to 695. And you could have gone to 430.22, but I think you need to follow the path to get you there. We obviously had to go to 430.250 in order to find out what the FLC was, right?
Yep. Yep.
So there was about 4 different pieces in there. Now, believe it or not, on an exam, this qualifies as a multiple step because it is a calculation. You had to do the 125%. So It might be like on a Texas exam, it might be like a one-step calculation. But I think we work through it. And so the point of dissecting a question is to be able to look at this question and say, I didn't have to worry about the percentages for voltage drop because it's not a part of this equation. It did tell me that it was 75 degrees C conductor, so that kept me solidly there. And all I had to do was go and design C played no role here in this. Okay. So there's a lot of pieces to that one. And here you go. So here's the trail of here's the trail, 25 horsepower, 208 volts, 74.8. That's what we got. 125%. Y'all did that. Perfect. And that's how we got the 93.5 amps. And that is literally all this question was asking. So if I asked this question and I had not given you this, it wouldn't have changed anything, right?
Right.
It's a motor's it's just a motor's a motor. Interesting enough for fire pumps, and I think Sean, you said how that 250, a 430.251 throws you. Mm-hmm. That is only when you have. So in a fire pump, I could go straight from the service or straight in under and up into the fire pump controller. But if I want to pass through a building and those conductors coming in are going to be unprotected, then I'm going to have to put. The code permits me to put a disconnect there. And in that point, I have to size that disconnect to lock rotor. And so that's when you would have that disconnect. But that you don't have to have that disconnect. Most people, the fire pumps stay outside of the building under the slab. They come up in the middle of a fire pump controller, and everything's in a fire pump controller. Then the ATS is there, the fire pump controller there, everything. And then it goes straight from there out to the fire pump. So just think of using 430.251 when there is a disconnect there that you're permitted to have. Not the one that you're required, but you're permitted to have the disconnect.
Gotcha.
All right, let's go. And we'll cover fire pumps one night on here because now that I'm opening up this Wednesday night to all the different tracks, that means that it's heavily talked about in the commercial program. So I'll be able to bring some of that stuff into this now. There's a reason so that I can actually share that course material in here as well. Moving forward. All right, next question. Good job. Dissected that, beat that one to death. All right, border lights and footlights in a theater shall be arranged so that no branch circuits applying such equipment carries a load exceeding blank. 30 amps, 20 amps, 16 amps, 15 amps. Okay, so what do you think the root here is?
Theater.
So this is a theater. So we have to look at something. And one of the things like Jay might do is he might say, well, that sounds like that's movie production, whatever. He might go to the table of contents and at the front. And he might look at the table of contents and say, okay, I'm going to focus here because I know there's a specific article that deals with this type of thing. So if you start looking at them, you'll see that 530 deals with motion picture and television studios. 540 deals with motion picture projection rooms. But it looks like, again, this is a theater. So I am thinking, it looks to me like it's probably going to be something in 530. But we don't know that yet, right? We don't have a clue. So we're going to go back and see if there's anything in the index about anything to do with theater. See if that's back here. Anybody? There is theaters. Actually in the index, theaters. And I'm looking down theaters. See if there's anything in here under theaters. But I'm also looking at what's the old rule we said. So it doesn't look like theaters is very big, does it?
No.
So it's not very big at all. So one of the things that I would probably do is immediately just go.
5 pages.
Is that 5 pages? Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Gee, that's bigger than I thought it would be. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how many of you in your career have ever worked in the movie theater or wired or done anything maybe or to that level? Anyway, I sure have. I'm sure I am sure Alec Baldwin has, but I have not. And maybe he won't have to worry about working it anymore. All right, so under 520, we do know we're in the right place because there is a definition for footlight, and that was carried in the question. And there's also a definition for border light, if you wondered what those were. Oh, incidentally, for 2023's NEC, all of these definitions disappear in the specific code articles. They're all going to be now in Article 100. So there's people like that they're all going to be there consolidated. But for me, it just makes Article 100 even more cumbersome, right? There's so many. It's going to be page after page after definitions. Here, if they're germane to this 520, I like them there. But that's where we're going in 2023. All the definitions are moving. So the .2s are no longer going to be for definitions anymore. All right. So anyway, what are we looking for? We're looking for an amp rating. So we could scan for amp rating, 20, 30, 16, 15. That 16 seems kind of weird, so that sticks out to me. Or we could be looking for the term border lights or footlights or the branch circuits. So if I'm on a bold scan, and I'm looking at the ants, kind of looking through. I see branch circuits, right? Then I see Porter says fixed stage, switchgear.
2041A.
Okay, so we're at fixed stage equipment other than switchboards. So it sounds like footlights and border lights are fixed things. Probably those ones. You know what? I didn't look at the definition, but a footlight, I guess that maybe those are the lights that wrap around the stage, maybe? I don't know. I didn't really look. But anyway, circuit loads. So we have a circuit, and this is a load-driven question. So it looks like, okay, well, it says circuits rated 20 amperes or less. So I see 20 amperes. It says footlights, border lights, and proscenium, whatever that is, side lights, shall be arranged so that no branch circuit supplying each equipment carries a load exceeding 20 amperes. And then I looked real quickly at B, and that's talking about heavy-duty lamp holders, which isn't in my question, so I'm not wasting my time with it. So at this point, I am pretty much feel like 20 is the answer. How do you guys feel?
Where are you at?
I'm at 520.41B.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
No, A. Excuse me. I'm at A. Yeah. I'm at A.
I'm with you on 20.
Everybody feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
That's it.
So we're gonna click it. There he is, 520.41A, and then that did not change in the 2017 or 20. Same as in the 2020. I can imagine there wasn't many changes to 520. I'm just trying to say, for those people out there that's your world, you have my condolences. If that's what you're, so.
I just want to share with the class again. I know we're always with this, we're taking it slow, but with a theater, we know that's a special location, right? So we can automatically isolate that to chapter 5, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And it's a good point, because in the Fast Trax program, you should have, or if you haven't, and I'm doing a tutorial to help explain to people how to do the best recommendations. So people ask me what the recommendations are to create flashcards. So I have a method that I like, but I'm going to actually put it in a video, and I'm going to actually create and use the program and record it and actually create a tutorial on the best articles that I think you should use and how you should do it. And so that's going to be available. That'll be available to everybody. But because, again, creating the flashcards for all the different articles, then doing it for all the different sections and everything like that are important. And so you can get to know the different pieces. Definitely helps. All right. Next one. Where are these weird questions coming from? All right. Lamps located in cellulose nitrate film storage vaults shall be, I'm sure we work on those every day, shall be installed in rigid luminaries of the blank type. Oh, all right. So, cellulose nitrate film storage vaults. All right, well, interesting. I might look back again at theaters just because I was there and see if it says anything about that, because I don't think it has anything to do with that. This sounds more like the projection room. So we were back at the table of contents again. If I was looking at that and I was just looking at where is it? We should probably mention this. When I was back earlier looking at 530 and 540, we weren't even paying attention to 520. And of course, we went to in the back, and that's what got us to 520. But there is right there in the table of contents, obviously 520 is theater rooms, audience, blah, blah, blah. So that's all there. So
if you go to films, and then it has motion picture, and then it says see also projection rooms motion picture, then it has storage vaults, 530, section 5.
Right. And another way to get there is if you go to the contents, table of contents, and look under 530, you'll see that part 5 of 530 says cellulose nitrate film storage vaults. And it takes you to page 467. And what's funny about that 530 is if you look at the table of contents, what is that? It shows you it goes from 464 to 467. So it's a whopping couple pages there. But anyway, so I'm going to go to 467, the page in my code book, not article, but page 467. And I'm on 467. Again, this is very specific. I'm looking for a cellulose nitrate film room. So we know we can jump to part 5 because that's what it said earlier. And let's see here. 2, 3. Bear with me. 4. Is there no part 5? Did I write that wrong? What did I do?
Said part 5, but there
It did say, hold on here.
Page 467.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Page 467. Yep, we're right. And it's about midway down in 530. It's about halfway down. It says cellulose nitrate film storage vault. It's, in fact, it's so short it was a snake would bite you because we were in 530 and we were looking at 540, but we said 530 and it was part 5. So lamps in cellulose nitrate film storage rooms. Lamps in cellulose, that's the old style films. You know, nobody makes those anymore. Well, I don't know. I haven't been in a movie theater in a while. I wonder if they still use the film like they normally do. I don't. I'm thinking I'm just too old for that or whatever. But anyway, so cellulose nitrate film storage vault shall be installed in rigid luminaires of the glass enclosed and gasketed type. So
there it is.
looks like there's the answer right there, right? And then you quickly always scan the rest of that paragraph so that you're not afraid you're not getting something like an or something else in there that say, oh crap, I jumped the gun. So I'm looking in there and there's nothing else in there. So that's
one of those that you can't use any real common sense on, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you could say,
All
well,
four
why
of
wouldn't a
those
vapor proof be all right? You know,
Right.
if it's glassed and closed and casketed, why wouldn't explosion proof be okay? Probably overkill, but you're right. They want the best possible answer, and this comes straight out of the code. So there it is. Very good. And that didn't change for 2017 to the 2020. So that stayed the same. All right. Hazardous classified atmospheres containing combustible metal dust. And I know some of you are already saying, dude, I know where to go for this. You're thinking, but let's go a little further. It says hazardous classified atmosphere containing combustible metal dust such as aluminum or magnesium are considered to be in material group blank classifications. Now, if you're a hazardous location junkie or you're Timothy McVeigh, you probably know what this is right away. But I don't. I'd have to go look it up. So for me, the most logical place that I tend to go when I see this is 500. But we know that combustible dusts are what? What article is combustible dust? So you have vapors and gas, you have combustible dust, and you have flyings. So you have 500 as your base that kind of tells you all about hazardous locations and conditions. And then you have individual articles. 501 for gas and vapors, 502 for combustible dust, and 503 for easily ignitable flyings and fibers. However, if you were to go, and we're going to do this, although I'm going to tell you, I think the answer is in 500, but we'll go look and see if it's in 502, if we can answer this question in 502. And then we'll look and see the difference of each one. So go to 502, and it might be here. And what I'm looking for is the class, right? So I am quickly, we haven't gone to the index yet. We haven't looked at the index. And usually 502 is going to talk about installation parameters and requirements for it and equipment and wiring and all in here. So I'll explain why I would think we'd be in 500, but let's kind of do this. Let's work this backwards. And if you're new to the program and you're watching on the stream, this is just how we do things. So again, don't beat your head in the ground. So we're looking at it, and I'm just looking, and I'm scanning over 502, or to be more accurate, I guess politically correct about it, it's 502, because I can hear somebody out there saying, Paul, there's no O in that. Trust me, I'm subject to that criticism all the time, so I'm used to it by now. So we're looking down, and I'm just really scanning it over, and this is all about equipment. This is not defining. So that's where immediately my gut was taking me to 500. But I'm quickly looking over this and see if it's talking about anything to do with the things that qualify to be in 502. And I'm just looking, and I'm not seeing anything in there. So we wanted to establish that. And that's kind of why we did it that way. Now, and again, the reason we didn't use the index, we could have done that. And so real quick, has anybody looked under combustible dust?
I looked under hazardous locations.
Okay, I'm there.
I didn't see, I saw combustible gases.
Well, here's the thing. If you look under hazardous classified locations, let's just do that first. So let's do like we always do. If you look at it and you scroll down, you'll see a couple things. Like above hazardous classified locations, see where it says hazardous atmospheres?
Yes.
And you see that it mentions this in the question, and we need to know what a class 1, class 2, and class 3 is. Then our mind would have drawn us to class 2 because that is combustible dusts under 500.5c. But let's not do that yet. Let's say we were, because we like to learn all the ways we could find the answer. So if you look at hazardous locations and you scroll all the way down and you go to the next column and you go down, you'll notice that when you get down, you'll get to what's called group classifications. And that's 500.6, right? And this is asking about a group classification. So now these are right beside each other. These are right next to each other. But the other thing under hazardous atmospheres, if you look at the left column, you'll see that it also says groups A through G, right? All of these right here fall between A and G, right?
Yeah, that's a big one right there.
Yeah, so 500.6 covered in hazardous atmospheres. It tells you to go to 500.6. But if you had to use hazardous classified locations, it also tells you the group classifications in a 500.6. So if I'm using the index for that, and again, in every code question on the exam is precious because, you hate to be the one to fail by one question, and it happens all the time. I'm going to 500.6. Now, I told you earlier that I would have gone to 500 to begin with because I knew this question was asking about the material, not the installation parameters of a location like a class 2. But we needed to go through the different pieces. All right, so I'm going to 500.6, and here's the material group. All right, so I am looking, and here's what we're going to see. So if you look at the groups, I got a group A, acetylene. Group B, flammable gases, vapor, and we skip B because that's not in our realm. C, flammable gases, vapor, yada, yada. D, flammable gases, flammable liquid, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let's see here. We're going to E, E says atmospheres containing combustible metal dusts, including aluminum and magnesium, and their commercial alloys or other combustible dust. So I mean, to me, I'm done right there, right?
Yep.
If I go to F, I can see that that's combustible carbonaceous dust, whatever the crap that is. So I'm like, dude, I've got that answer. So remember now, when you're in an exam, you're hyper-focused. So you would have been going to the index. You would have been back here. We're just slowing it down. We're trying to learn something from the process. So in this case, the answer is going to be what? E. Everybody agree?
Yes, sir.
And there it is. So remember, questions on an exam, questions that's dealing with hazardous classified locations, if it's asking you about the makeup, the atmosphere, the material, then that's 500. And that's going to give you all those things. If it's asking you about installation parameters and clarifications and things like that for class groups like class 1, class 2, class 3, then you're going to go into that specific article for that specific class. Okay? So just remember, the 500 is your gateway. That's where you set the tone, and then you can siphon it off into the different, depending on the classes that you're working with. Of course, the materials you got to identify what it is before you can even know which class to work in. Even though we know that we would have been a class 2, and we know we were dealing with combustible dust, since this one was asking these specific questions, in the index we would have found that pretty quickly. So that one would have been easy to find. All right. Now, so far, the questions have been accurate on here. We haven't found any of those boner questions that are in this thing yet, so it's good. All right, so next. The local utility company is to supply a one-family dwelling with a 120 240 volt, single phase, messenger-supported service drop. That is, that's your service drop with a aluminum conductor with a steel core. That's what that is. That's a self-supporting messenger. That extends directly above the swimming pool. Okay. Not sure why they want to do that, but okay, they're going to do it. If the pool has a diving board 2 feet above the water level, the service drop conductors must have a clearance of at least blank above the diving board. Okay. Sorry. So where do you think we're gonna go with this one? We have a lot of mentions about clearances. We have mentions about swimming pools and things like that. So where do you think we're gonna go? Where do you think you want to be? Now, if you want to go to the index, lead me there. Tell me what you want to do in the index.
I'm gonna start with 680.
All right, you'd start with 680. Now 680, being I'm on that code panel, 680 is pretty big. So are you gonna bold scan, or you have it in your mind what you're looking for? Sounds like you have in your mind what you're looking for. You're looking for a little diagram, right?
That's right. You got
Yeah,
three
that's
little
right.
pictures back there with a table right.
680.98.
Yeah. So you're looking for the pretty little pictures and that overhead clearance table, right?
That's right.
So
Okay.
if you go to service, it points you to 680.9.
Okay, so under service, you looked under the in the back. If you didn't know, you went to service, and let me do that too, so I can go look at it. Service. Does it? Where you at? Where you looking at? Where are you looking at? I wouldn't have gone there, but let's go there. Help me out, safety person. It would be under which one under services are you looking for? You talking about in the index? I bet I should have said that.
Yeah, under 230.24.
Oh, you went into 230.
Yes,
Okay, see,
230.24D.
Okay, so I would have gotten there by that. I would have gone straight to pools, but that's probably because I work in pools or work in that code panel. You're looking at it from the service end of it. So you went to your avenue to look for it is D, and then it ends up sending you to 680.90. So again, you went there, it ended up sending you. So there we go. That's one way. If you were on the exam and you're like, dude, this is a service. This is a drop. I better go to service. But I got to remember there's a swimming pool involved. then yeah, you could have gotten that answer by looking at 230.24 D. And it would have ultimately sent you back to 680. If you had identified this as a swimming pool and you have dabbled in 680 before, you know that there's this little table, a little pictogram back there that might have, you said, oh, I remember that table. It's got the little picture of the pool with the diving board or whatever. Go there. As far as the back of the book, I think if you had gone under swimming pools, also, see under swimming pools, let's see if it had clearances. Just for craps and giggles, since we're here. Sure it does, somewhere in there. I would think somewhere in here it would have it. It'd be nice if it did under swimming pools. But it might not. Might be a, well, wiring 2, and that is 680.24B. That's not helping us any. Just thinking of ways people would have gotten there if they didn't know to go like we did. Yeah, I don't see anything else under swimming pools that would have helped in that scenario under swimming pools. You would have ended up at 680. So we know that there's a now also just for craps and giggles in the back, clearances. Anything under C for clearances? And again, for those that don't know why we doing what we're doing, this is our process. You know what you need to do in the last 2 weeks when it comes to studying for the exam and timing yourself. Only you can do that. I can't do that for you. So here's another way, clearances. If you look at clearances and we follow down clearances, you'll see swimming pools and it says 680.9. So you would have gotten there from there as well. So that's another way you would have gotten clearances. And while you're here, you're looking at clearances, you know, it's talking about clearances, network power communications, luminaire clearances, different clearances, all underneath the clearance header. Okay, so swimming pools would have got us to 680.9 anyway. So we're at 680.9. All right, we're here now. Okay, so what are we looking for? We're looking for diving board. It's 2 feet above the water level. But focus on the question of the service drop. Conductors must have a clearance of at least blank above the diving board. So what's our choices here? Help me out. Now, how do we get to use the table first? Where are we going to go in 680.9 to give me permission to use this table? Well, 680.9A, right?
Yes.
That says
Well, it's got a little diagram there for B. That's your diving board.
Yep, that's your well,
So
let's see.
clearance
Is it
parameters on your table down there? You would go to B, and then you would look in the question there. It says messenger supported service drop, and in that first part it says insulated cable 0 to 750 volts and ground supported on cable together with a solid ground and bare messenger, or solid ground and neutral conductors. So I'm thinking that's the column you would go under there. So you slide
okay? So
over
here's the question though. Here's the question though. The question says that the diving board was 2 feet above the water level, right?
Right.
So B in that illustration in A, above the diving board, the measurement, it's the amount above the diving board. You notice how that dotted line is curved? So B says a clearance in any direction to the observation stand, tower, or diving platform. And so if it says 14.5 feet, right?
Yes.
So what is our clearance? And I guess 14.5 equates also, for those that didn't know, that's 14 feet 6 inches. It's the 0.5 is 6 inches. So what do you think the answer is? So this is a clearance in any direction to the diving board. So the question tells us that the pool diving board is 2 feet above the water level. Does that matter? Doesn't really matter, does it? We're measuring to the diving board, right?
Right, exactly. So I mean, in a way, if they happen to have a weird diving board in real life that was like touching the water, I guess I don't
That
know.
wouldn't be much of a diving board.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we just got to go with what we have here, which is that chart
that's right.
in the code book, you know.
Right. So B
So,
says above the diving board.
yeah.
So B says clearance in any direction to the observation stand, tower, or diving board. 14.5, right?
Yes, sir.
So would y'all agree? Would we go with that answer?
That's what
Now
I
the-
would choose.
Now, the only other thing is depending on how this person asks this question, do you think that the reason there's 16 feet 6 inches because the 14 plus 2 is 16? But he didn't say what is the clearance from the water level above the diving board, because it has to be 14 and a half above the diving board. And since that diving board is 2 feet above the water level, theoretically it would be 16 feet 6 inches from the water level. But this is asking for the clearance to the diving board.
Yep.
So let's see if the person asking this question knew that, or is that where they're going?
Torn.
Look at the chain. So when he says 22 and a half,
Base of diving platform.
so look
So
at the
in that A section, it does say base of diving platform. Under
right.
clearance parameters A.
Yeah, so look at how the question is written. That's why we spend a lot of time on this question. Because it is a poorly worded question. First. Because if you look at A, which is what they're selecting, the application for A, 22 and a half feet, right? It says clearance in any direction to the water's edge of water surface, base of the diving platform, or permanently anchored raft, right? The question didn't say anything about the base of the diving board. It didn't show anything about it. If you look at the diagram on figure 680.9a at the top, notice how it's showing a measurement from the base of the diving board. That is A, right?
Which is just your concrete slab, right?
Yeah, right there, right. Yeah, right at the base, right where the diving board connects to the thing, right?
Yeah.
So for me, the question is more applicable to B, the clearance in any direction to the observation stand, tower, or diving platform.
Yep.
And so to me, that would be 14.5, right? So based on this question and reason I said, look at it, because I think it's a poorly written question. This would be correct if it had said at least blank above the diving board base.
Right.
Then I could make that argument for the 20 feet 6 inches. But so again, and it's actually to clarify, it is one of the ones that on the dodo list, but it was worth examining it and going deeper into
I
it.
see they were trying to be tricky, really, because what they were trying to get was you to come up with the service extending above the pool
Mm-hmm.
more than anything, and they try to like throw you for a loop by making you do the deduction of the diving board there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, they want you to. It sounds like they want you to measure to the water.
Yes,
right?
That's what they were wanting.
Yeah.
That's all they were wanting, really.
Now it is 22 and a half feet from the water to that messenger, but that's not really what they're asking in the question. I'm looking at diving board, and I'm thinking B is the one. And clearance in any direction from the diving platform. In that case, it would be a B measurement, and if I go over, to me, that's 14 and a half.
Yeah.
That type of scenario. So, but, questions that make you think. All right. Next question. Gosh, so this should be one that you answer right away. We've discussed it. For
Eight.
individual dwelling units with a single phase 122 volt electrical system and not over 400 amperes. Hey, Michael, there you go, Michael. And NEC permits. Again, all this wordage that's even in this question should make you immediately permits, and it's telling you it's not over 400. It's telling you it's a 124. Man, they might as well just give you this question, right?
Yeah.
But if you get 100 of these on your exam, man, it's time for you to crack open a cold one, because you'll
But
be out of
even
it.
these ones, I wouldn't have if I didn't take the course. I don't know
Oh,
how
yeah.
people do it. Taking courses is crazy to me.
Yeah, well, and believe how many people out there don't remember the 83% rule. And everybody wants that table to be in the 2020 code book. It's back. But they don't realize that before that table, you just had to do the math. That table was based on the math. Now, the table used to be there a long time ago. That's the table in 310.12, in case anybody's wondering. If you're in the 2017 code, you'll notice it's not there. It's in Informative Annex D. But again, informative annexes are just good information. It's just helpful calculations. But you had to do the calculation, and you had to know what you had to use. So, and the bad thing about it being in the code in 310.12 now is that the problem with that is people used to think that table was an all-inclusive, means it didn't matter if you had more than 3 current conductors, or it didn't matter if the ambient temperature was more than 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And that was never the case. So it's been clarified now that if you've got adjustment and corrections, you can't just pull straight from that table. You have to do a calculation using the ampacity values in 310.16. But you still apply the 83%. It can't be less than 83%, but you're just going to treat it like the old calculation that you did before to make sure that you select the conductor that's not less than 83% of the service or feeder rating. So it's still the 83%. And for those that wonder, in my D-rating demystified, we go over that and show an example of that. And in fact, we have some recorded sessions of this that we did the 1 and 2 family that I actually, and if you in the members area, you can watch the old sessions where I did the 1 and 2 family. So anyway, answer this question. 400 amperes permitted service conductors to have an ampacity of not less than blank of the service rating. And what's the answer? 83, 80, 75, or 90?
83.
83%. And where do you find it? In the 2020 code. It's in where?
310.12.8.
Yep. And in the 2017 code, for you 2017 junkies, it's in what? 310.15b7, right? And here's a funny one. They got the wrong reference for the 2017 because it wasn't in 310.12a in 2017.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
So in the exams, we always gotta do the 83% no matter what, right? At the end.
Yeah. And on an exam, you want to do the 83% unless they state otherwise, or all the parameters aren't there. Like we looked at earlier, we had one, it was office, and it's kind of, because I couldn't turn it back, I had just forgot that it was an office calc, that they wouldn't apply. But the code is looking for the best possible answer. So on an exam, if the 83 can be applied because all the parameters are there, then you definitely want to apply it. Most certainly.
Thank you.
Because it's not an exception. That is a rule in the code. It's permitted to do it that way. Now, if you want to size everything full size and not take advantage of it for the conductors, then you can do that. That's your prerogative. And I make wire and cable, bigger the better. As far as I'm concerned, you can 1,000 KC mill to every house if you want. But the reality is you probably have trouble terminating it. But you can do that if you want. That's not the best possible answer for an exam. All right. Next question. God, there's some tough exam questions tonight. Where liquid tight flexible metal conduit, LFMC, is installed in a Class 1 Division 2 hazardous location. Check it out, man. FLMC in a Class 1 Division 2 location. It shall be permitted to delete the bonding jumper if the FMC is not longer than blank and the overcurrent protection in the circuit is limited to do blank or less, and the load is not a power utilization load. Wow, that is a freaking mouthful there of a question.
Yeah.
Here's the good news. Most exam questions on an exam aren't 2-answer questions, right? They're just give me an answer question. Just give me the answer thing, right? So, but this is going to be a good one for us to dissect and look around, because along the way, I can teach you a little bit about LFMC for those that work with it or not. All right. So first things first, since we're talking about a Class 1 Division 2 location, tell me the article for Class 1.
501.
501. All right, so we're gonna look at 501 real quick, just because we're doing a little lesson here. So we're looking at the 501. We're into part 2 because we're looking at the wiring, right? So we automatically know that it's something to do with Class 1 Division 2. So we can skip over Class 1 Division 1. We're looking straight at Class 1 Division 2. We're looking at it, and we're looking at the different wiring types. And what we're doing is we're going to see whether or not there is anything in here about LFMC. If there's anything listed with LFMC anywhere. He's already got it. You got it already?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Always though.
All right. So
I'll give you a hint though. What I scanned for was grounding stuff.
oh, did you? Looking for the grounding allowance or whatever?
Yeah. Well, that was to me my next was bonding, grounding, something along that lines, and then I kind of started honing it in on LFMC.
Okay. All right. Well, walk us through your mental process
Okay.
here.
I made my way over to
So for you, you focused on the grounding binding. So you ended up being all the way up into the 501.30 area.
I'm in 501.100.
Okay, you went 501.100 equipment.
Yeah, well, is that
No,
where
I
I'm
wouldn't
at?
know if I'd have gone that far.
I'm sorry. That's just what the top of the page said. I'm
Yeah.
at 501.30
Right.
AFB.
Okay. So
That's
you were looking at types of equipment grounding conductors, right?
Yes.
All right. Read me. What does that say?
Well, the first part leads up to it, but it says flexible metal conduit and liquid type flexible metal conduit shall include an equipment bonding jumper of the wire type in compliance with 250.102.
Okay.
So there we've got our LFMC.
Yeah.
And then you go to exception. In Class 1 Division 2 locations, the bonding jumper shall be permitted to be deleted where all the following conditions are met. And our blanks on the question is not longer than blank, and the circuit is limited to blank or less. Well, one says listed liquid type flexible metal conduit, 6 feet or less in length with fittings listed for grounding is used.
Okay.
And 2, overcurrent protection in the circuit is limited to 10 amperes or less.
Right. And then, of course, the icing on the cake is the number 3, which talks about power utilization loads, which is in the question, right?
Yes.
Okay. So in your way, you went to 501 and you're saying, okay, and that's a good way. That's dissecting. You bold scanned it pretty quickly. So you must use that as your primary method for searching. You like to bold scan. So you use that method and you said, look, the question, dissecting it, the question is asking about what? The question is saying, okay, Bonnie, now, it did not say in the question equipment bonding jumper. So we have to deduce that that's what we're talking about. You're not going to get a question that gives you everything, right?
Right.
But, because it depends on who writes the question. But what we can pull together is that we know that we're in the right place because of the answers that are on the screen. So you used your answers, plus it all matches up, right?
Yes.
Now, interesting enough, if you had have looked in the back under hazardous locations, if you just drew a blank, if you didn't know, for example, that we're dealing with a situation, it tells you Class 1 Division 2 where you could do the bold scan. If you looked in the back, does it say anything about LFMC in the back. Now it does say. Now here's the other thing that you can practice, folks. Since you know the answer is going to be in .30 section, when you now since we're in hindsight, we're learning. We look back at hazardous locations, class 1, because the other one is hazardous locations, class 1, class 2, class 3. That's broad. And then you have hazardous classifications, class 1, which is what this is. If you look down it, you can look and see which one has the .30 section after it to help you learn. So that's another technique that you can do using these questions. Whether you get it right or wrong, is use the answers and everything to dissect it and go back and find out in the index how to find the different sections and say, well, now I know that it's .30. Is .30 and how is it worded under the hazardous classified locations, if it's even there? So I know it's .30. So if you go under hazardous classified locations class 1, because that's what this is, right?
Yep.
Then you get down, you see grounding.
Yes.
So
501.30.
501.30 would have got you where you needed to be. Is there anything else in there? Not really. That's it. And then we wouldn't go to the other ones. Class 2, that's not in play here. It's all class 1. Now, what about under the hazard classified locations, the one before that, just the general one? Is there any .30s in that? No. So that looks like that is like we said, that is just your generic classified hazard locations dealing with the bigger, broader scope of what has to be a hazardous classified location, what qualifies. And then you get down into class 1, class 2, class 3, and all that, and it digs deeper. So you could have.
Bonding, they got 501.
What about 502.30?
Huh?
B. 502.30B.
502.30B? Well, yeah, but this is 502 is combustible dust. We're in class 1. So yeah, the rules are probably identical in class 2, probably, because that's less restrictive than typically class 1. But we don't even need to go to class 2, Edgar, because we know the question's asking class 1. So we can stop in class 1. And somebody said it, there's also bonding in here.
Yes, and if I were to use the index, that's probably the one I would have went to first, because it does actually say bonding in the question, not grounding, even though that could still, we can still hit it probably. But yeah, that 501.30A under bonding would have.
Yeah. So what does this tell me? This is probably, if you had done it in hindsight, you probably would have said, well, I'd probably worded the question a little better. But you got to remember, the beauty of these is that you got to remember, and I helped write exam questions for quite a few states. We didn't rewrite them all, and some of them that we'd go like, we could write that better. And we were always told we don't have the time. We got 4,000, whatever the number was. We have to get through these questions and make sure they're still relevant. If we started cherry picking every one of them, then we'd never. So you're going to run into a question that might be odd. But we're going to go with this and see what their code reference is. So we agree at 6 and 10, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got here. Correct. And it's using 501.30B, and that's where we're at, and that's the exceptions. And of course, it says exception number 1 and number 2, but I don't see but one exception here. So again, we're going to assume that that's the best this person could write this question. Although if I was writing it, probably would have put equipment grounding. Something I would have put equipment grounding conductors or something a little more. But here's the thing, even in the title, and we're not perfect, guys, on code panels. Even in the title, it says equipment grounding conductors, but in the body of B, it says equipment bonding jumper.
Right.
So good news is we know equipment grounding conductors, equipment bonding jumpers typically are providing the same role to hopefully clear an overcurrent protected device. So, all right, next one. Okay. Good God. All right, each motor controller. Wow, I tell you, the master electrician questions are pretty good. Each motor controller shall be capable of blank and blank the motor it controls. All right, so you could probably say, well, if it's a motor controller, it's starting and stopping it, right?
Yes.
I wouldn't think starting and running. I mean, it seems like that running is a synonym of starting. If you're starting it, you're running. And what would I want to have stopping and interrupting? Because I had nothing to start the daggone thing. And what would be stopping and disconnecting? That don't make sense. So if I was trying to do deductive reasoning here, but we're not going to, we're going to play dumb. And we're saying, okay, we're talking about a motor controller. Okay. Go to the index. Now, this is a good example of one in an exam. If I was going through there and I wanted to get me some extra time, and I'll focus. If I was like, Jude, I think I know the answer, but I don't, I'm going to answer it so in case I don't get back to it, because I'm pretty sure I'd say that. And then, and if you're not 100% sure, like, you know what, this looks like it's too simple. Something in here's got to, they're trying to play me. Yeah. So then you could go on and mark it, tick it on the system electronically, tick it, and it'll come back at your next wave, and you can spend a little more time on it. What you don't want to do is worry about the fact that you don't answer it and you leave it blank, and then the next thing you know, you skip it. All right, so let's go to motor controller in the index. Of course, if you go under 430, you could go to the little infogram that's at the beginning of 430, and that tells you where motor controllers are. But I'm going to go to the index because I happen to know there is one called motor controllers back there. And so I'm at motor controllers and its definition. Then it says disconnecting means. It says electronically operated pool covers. That nothing to do with that. Hazardous locations. Nothing in here about that. Markings, power conversion equipment, tunnels. So what I do notice that it's probably not very big. Motor controllers. And what is that? Is that what is that? 7? Part 7? So I'm gonna go. Is that 6, 7? Yeah, that's the Roman numeral 7, right?
430.2 under definitions controller.
Okay. Does it say that? So that's the definition. So it says definition of. Now this is acting like it's showing a capability, but you know what? Definitions might give us that. But one key thing we want to remember is that this, if we have to go to this part, it's not big. Part 7 is not big. Well, let's do that. Let's go to 430, the definitions first. And if any of you also out there want to buy tabs, you notice we don't sell our tabs anymore. Be careful when you buy those tabs that are the colored ones. And I can't remember the company, but they come transparent and they suck. You can't, if you're in a, if you're, see, I've got 2 types here. See, my colored ones here, that in my 2017, see how those, if you can see it, see how those are solid colors? They're nice. That's great. But then the company changed to these. I don't know if you folks can see these. They're transparent. You know, and I haven't put mine on here. And I did them on a 17 to show people the difference in mine. The ones that I used to make, if you see mine are the white ones. So they stick out. But I don't make them anymore because they're a pain in the butt. People thought we mass produced those. No, I made them personally, myself, every time for students. That got old quickly. All right. So take us where who is that? The LG safety woman?
430.2 controller.
Okay, so that's under motors. It says any switch or device that is normally used to start and stop a motor by making and breaking the motor circuit current. Okay. I'm feeling like we're good with starting and stopping. That wins it for me. But you know us, what are we going to do? If we go down underneath it and look at the numbers, the scale under this on the fire pumps, under 430 for the motors, notice if we look down the list here of the parts, this is another way to get where you need to get quickly. I'm looking at motor controllers, 430.81 through 430.90. I'm going to take this opportunity to see what it says in 430.81 through 430.90 because that ain't very big. So let's go to 430.81 and see what it happens to say. Even though I would, you know what, I'd pick that starting and stopping. I'd feel comfortable with that. All right. However, if you look at design, 430.85, starting and stopping jumped out at me. And it says, each controller shall be capable of starting and stopping the motor it controls. So that is more accurate to the question. Now, I feel very comfortable, and you feel LRG. It's you. What can I call you other than LRG? You're in here so often, I want to call you by your name.
It's Renee.
Renee. That's right, Renee. Okay. So Renee, in that scenario, you could have done that and been comfortable with it, but the more accurate one would be 430.81, or excuse me, 82. But I think that we used our deductive reasoning to realize that's the only real plausible answer anyway. But yeah, you can get there all different ways, but that one is more specifically how it's written and using the index to get there. But like I said earlier, for motor controllers, I probably would have gone right to part 7 because I knew that it's not very big. I mean, how big is it? It's maybe 1.5 pages, if that. And I would have started looking for things like stopping and starting based on the language. But I think, yeah, you're right. You could have got there with the definition if that's where you went. So either way, we would have gotten the answer. Let's check our answer. And they want 430.82a. But you would have got it right either way. So that's key. So that's why on the Fast Trax, I want you to give me code references, and I mark it wrong when you leave a code reference blank. Even if you get the question right and your code reference is wrong, I'm okay with that. At least you gave me a code reference. It's when you leave it blank that I just mark it wrong, even if you got the question right, because that allows me to share the answer to you rather than I'm not going to show you the answer to the ones you got right. So that's why I do it that way. So again, support all your questions on the competency reviews in the Fast Trax program. Support all your answers with a code reference. It doesn't matter. As long as you got the right answer, it might be the wrong reference. So for example, Renee, I might have wanted 430.82a, but if you felt you got the answer 430.2 and that was a reference you gave, as long as you get the right answer, I'm okay with that. But as long as you provide some type of code references, I can't stand blank. Now, I get it. Sometimes people can't find something and they'll put question marks in there. Well, at least that tells me you were thinking. You just didn't know what you couldn't find any reference, and that's okay too. But I hate blanks. You know. All right. Next question. All right. Maybe this is a quick one. Boom. We would have got this one and move on. Where 2 driven ground rods form an entire grounding electrode system of a temporary service. What is the maximum size copper conductor required to bond the ground rods together regardless of the size of the service? Now, the first thing people would say is, well, it's temporary. I don't have to treat this like a regular service. I only have to put 1 rod to it because it's temporary. I hear that all the time. And in fact, you might find this interesting, Tim, is North Carolina believes that you only have to have 1 ground rod to a temporary pole. And I argued this with them. And the reality is they're the only place in the country that feels that way. Because a service is a service. It doesn't matter whether it's temporary. The electrons don't know any different. The hazards don't know any different. It's the same condition. Lightning doesn't know any different. So whether it's temporary or permanent, you install the grounding electrode system the same way. So in this case, it is ground rods. And somebody talk me through. Now, the other thing that it implies here, so we'll just talk about it. It implies that you have to tie the 1 ground rod to the other ground rod. That's not true. The first ground rod is the requirement in the code. The second ground rod is the requirement to supplement the 1 ground rod if you can't show 25 ohms or less. But that second ground rod doesn't have to connect to the first ground rod. It can connect to 4 other locations, or it might even be 5 other locations on the system, right? And we'll see that. But right now, let's work our way through sizing. So 6, 4, 2, and 8. If any of you just blurt it out, if you were taking an exam right now and you got this question and you were really trying to conserve your time, what is your answer going to be right now? Just go.
4.
Somebody said 4. And you would
I
move
would
on.
say
6.
All right. One would say 8, one says 6, one say 4. I can tell you that 2 of you are wrong. That's obvious. So somebody might as well, Edgar will say 2. You might as well have it all rounded out now. Everybody's picked the number. Okay. First things to
I
remember.
got it. 6.
First to remember, it's ground rods. And we're
Yep.
talking about sizing the what? The bonding jumper between that goes to bond the 2 together, which doesn't have to be larger than the grounding electrode conductor that's permitted to bond to run to the actual electrode, the first one, which is your ground rod. That's your grounding electrode. Your second one is your supplemental electrode. Together, they make up the entire grounding electrode system. With me? All right. So the first thing that I would look at in this question, if I'm dissecting it, is we're talking about ground rods. Ground rods are grounding electrode systems. We know that's going to be in Article 250, right? And we should know by now that the grounding electrodes are all listed under 250.52, and we have a bunch of them. So if you're doing this on an exam and you're used to that, you've been doing your flashcards, you're learning your different articles, you know the different grounding electrode systems, you know that we've talked about the different tables, 250.66 for sizing grounding electrode conductors, as opposed to 250.122 for equipment grounding conductors, as opposed to supply side bonding jumpers, and that is 250.102C. So we would know we'd be in that area of 250.66 for sizing of grounding electrode conductors and their associated bonding jumpers, right? Now, of course, I'm sure is all get out that you could go to the index and there'll be something under ground rods or something under grounding electrodes or something like that. So I want you to feel comfortable with knowing in this question, and I guess maybe it's because I'm biased because I'm on this code panel, that I think everybody should know Article 250, which is probably one of the most important articles in the code. But I just, those are certain tables that you want to remember. Okay. So let's go to 250.66. Well, before we even do that, let's go to 250.52. That way we can look at the ground rod and I can explain this whole piece in here as a little lesson. So 250.52, if you're in your 2020 code, it's on page 120. And you come down to A5, ground rods. So it says rod and pipe electrodes shall not be less than 8 feet in length and shall consist of the following material. And of course, it tells you that it can be a pipe, it can be a rod, it can be a conduit, gives you dimensions. It tells you it can be a rod, can be a rod type grounding electrode of stainless steel and copper or zinc coated steel, which is probably what you get the most of. And it shall be at least 5/8 of an inch in diameter, unless it's listed. If it's listed, it can be other than 5/8 of an inch. Now, when it comes to the installation of this grounding electrode system, you're going to go to 250.53. And here, the first one that sticks out to you for our need is rods. Right at the beginning, it says rods, pipe, and plates. Now, it says rods, pipe, and plates electrodes shall meet the requirements of 250.53A1 through A3. Notice the first one, which everybody ignores in the existence of installers, is it's required to be below permanent moisture levels. I'm sure you all do that, right? I'm sure you all drive your ground rods down below your water line, right? Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, we all do that, right? So whatever the permanent moisture level is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, half the people, I'm lucky if they even get it to the ground. But anyway, it says if practicable, which means you can argue that it's not practicable. You can say, I can't get it down. Okay. It says rod, pipe, and plate electrodes shall be embedded below the permanent moisture level Rod, pipe, and plate electrodes shall be free from non-conductive coatings such as paints or enamels. And if you buy a rod, they're not going to be paints or enamels. They're going to have the zinc coated, and that's sacrificial to the rod, and that's fine. But here's the most important one: 250.53A2, supplemental electrode required. So if you ever get a question on the exam and they say, what are the electrodes that are required to be supplemented? And I can see that on an exam. Well, you know the water pipe ground's got to be supplemented, right? And where do we find that? Just look directly to the right of where you're looking at here for 250.53A. Look directly to the right and you'll see D. It says metal underground water piping. And then you go down to D2, it talks about supplemental electrode required. So you have to supplement the metal water pipe ground, okay? But if you use ground rods, guess what? You have to put 2 in. If you put 1 in, you have to supplement it with another type of electrode. Most people are just going to put another ground rod in, unless you can prove that it's 25 ohms or less. And you can't use a standard ohm meter to do this. It's got to be a ground resistance meter. It's got a 3-point follow, 4-point follow potential meter, clamp on that does ground resistance. You can't use an ohm meter to do it. I had a guy one time stick one end of his fluke in the dirt and one end on the thing and said, see, look, it's below 25. I'm like, dude, I wasn't born yesterday, so that's not going to work. He says, oh, you mean I got to go out and buy one of those $1,500 to testers to be able to do this? I'm like, no, I mean, you go out and you buy a $15 ground rod and stick another ground rod in it and move on. That's what I'm telling you. But, you know, he wanted to argue it. Anyway, so here's what it talks about. And see, it says 5 options here. That's what I was right, 5. It says a single rod. Now, we're at 250.53A2, if you're following along. It says a single rod, pipe, or plate electrode. Now, remember, rod, pipe, or plate, all those 3 have to be supplemented, okay? Unless you can show 25 ohms or less. It says, shall be supplemented by an additional electrode of the type specified in 250.52A2 through A8. So you don't have to take a ground rod, pipe, or plate and supplement it with another rod, pipe, or plate. I can supplement it with any of them, from the metal in-ground support structure steel to concrete encased electrode. I can supplement it. Okay, most people aren't. They're going to do ground rod, they're going to put another ground rod in it, and you're going to move on. But here it tells you. Now, here's the interesting thing. This talks about that supplemental electrode. Check this out, because everybody thinks that you got to go from the panel to the first rod and then from that rod to the second rod. You know, and I get tons of questions on this that people submit to me. Here's what it says. It says a single rod, pipe, plate, or plate electrode shall be supplemented by an additional electrode of the type specified in 250.52A2 through A8. It says the supplemental electrode, that's the second one, shall be permitted to be bonded to one of the following. I can bond it to the other rod, pipe, or plate like the first one, and that's what you normally would see, and that's what most people would do, number 1. Number 2, I can take that supplemental and I can take it to the grounding electrode conductor. So that's the one that's coming down to the first rod. I can come up and connect it to that grounding electrode conductor that's coming down to that first electrode if I want. The third option, I can take that supplemental rod and I can run it and connect it to the grounded service entrance conductor, the grounded conductor, the neutral, which back in the panel is going to be where you have a main bonding jumper. It's going to connect the grounded conductor to the case, and all of that's going to be connected to the grounding electrode conductor anyway, going down to the first ground rod. So that's fine. And then the fourth one says I can also go from that second ground rod and I can actually take it to a non-flexible grounded service raceway. So that would be, maybe you have the service raceway coming up into the meter. Maybe it's rigid metal, intermediate metal, EMT. And as long as all of that supply side bonding is done properly, right? And it's a service raceway, meaning it's got service conductors in it, then I can connect it to that if I want. Nobody does that, but that is an option. And remember, this is for that second electrode. And then the fifth one says I can take it to any grounded service enclosure. So here's the other thing that people lose out. So if I have a panel, like you or me are doing a panel, let's say me and you are doing a panel, and I go from that panel to one ground rod, and I go from the grounded terminal bus, where I had the main bonding jumper in there, the green screw, let's say, that connects to the grounded conductor, you know, panels that you've done every day of the week. I come out of there with a grounding electrode conductor down to my first ground rod. But now I have to put the second one in. The second one, I could take that and run that conductor all the way back to that service panel and put it on its own separate lug that's drill and tapped to the back of the enclosure. I don't have to take it to the grounded terminal bus because it says that I can take it to any grounded service enclosure. Didn't require me to take it back to the grounded terminal bus. Okay. That was option 3. So that supplemental one gives you a lot of leeway. Okay. Now the exception is to say, oh, by the way, it says, hey, by the way, if you do show 25 ohms or less, don't worry about that supplemental. You're good. Just that one rod piper plate. That's fine. Okay. Okay. So that's where we was kind of a little lesson on that. Because again, people come up with, they think that they have to be daisy chained together. They also think that it can't be broken from the first ground rod to the second ground rod. They say, oh, it's got to be unbroken, complete. No, only to the first one. From the first one to the second one, that's a bonding jumper. You could put 2 acorns on one rod if you want, but if you want to save an acorn, you just loop it through. It's probably what we all do. But you could break it right there at that first ground rod if you wanted. It's perfectly fine. Nothing against it. As you can see, you got many options for that supplemental that you want to run. Now, moving over to sizing, since that was just kind of a quick lesson on that, let's go to 250.66. And you go to 250.66. Now, here's a couple things I'll remind you when you're working on an exam and you're preparing. If they do not tell you that it's one of the items that are in 250.66 A, B, or C, which A is dealing with rod pipes or plates, B is dealing with concrete encased electrodes, and C is dealing with ground rings. So if you get an exam question and you're sizing a grounding electrode conductor and it's a water pipe ground, then you want to make sure you're using table 250.66 because this catches all the other types of electrodes except for rod pipe or plates, concrete encased electrodes, and ground rings, because those give you the allowance to use 250.66 A, B, or C, depending on which type of electrode you're dealing with. So to give you a summary, to lock this in your head, if it's a water pipe ground, you're going to size it table 250.66, and that would be 250.52A, right? If you're doing, what's the second one? If you're doing the metal in-ground support structure, you're going to table 250.66. If you're doing concrete encased electrodes, which is 250.52A3, then where are you going? You're going to 250.66B, right? You're not going to the table. If you're doing 250.52A4, which is ground rings, then you're going to go to 250.66C because that's dealing with ground rings. If you're doing 250.52A5, which is rod pipes and plates, then you're going to be going to 250.66A for sizing that grounding electrode conductor. If you're going to 250.52A6, which is other listed electrodes, then you're going to go to table 250.66 because it's not one of those that are listed in A, B, and C. If you're going to 250.52A7, which is plate electrodes, then you're able to go where? 250.66A, because that lists plate electrodes there. If you're going to 250.52A8, other local metal underground systems or structures, then you're going to go where? You're going to pull from table 250.66. Okay. So that's kind of just a synopsis to remember how that applies. All right. Now, for our question, we're talking ground rods. So if you look at 250.66A, here's what it says. Connections to rods, pipes, and plates. It says if a grounding electrode conductor or bonding jumper, again, bonding jumper, connecting to a single or multiple rods, pipe, or plates, so that's what that one is between the rods, that's a bonding jumper. It says, or any combination thereof. It says, as described in 250.52A5 or A7, and it does not extend to other types of electrodes that require a larger size conductor. It says the grounding electrode conductor shall not be required to be larger than a 6 AWG copper wire or 4 AWG aluminum wire. Okay. That's it. Everybody good on that? So when it comes to ground rods, It's not required to be larger than a 6. Now, can it be? And do engineers specify it larger than a 6 in many occasions? Absolutely, they do. Do they necessarily know why? Probably not, but they do. Because if you're using ground rods, it's kind of like sticking 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. You're not getting it in there. A ground rod can only handle so much based on its testing surface area, surface tension, how it's driven, the surface area that's in contact with the soil, because you're required to drive ground rods. Okay, you have to drive them. If you can't drive it because it hits rock, then you're able to go up to a 45 degree. If that hits rock, then you're allowed to lay it in a trench, which is going to be compacted, right? What you can't do is have somebody doing your service and they're excavating around the side and you put your service in and there's a big gap between the foundation and you're thinking, oh crap, dude, I don't have to do anything. I'll just stick it in the ground and they'll backfill. You can't do that. It's got to be driven. The code requires it to be driven. The only way you can get to lay it in a trench is if you go through and you can't drive it because you hit rock. You go 45, you hit rock. The reason is we need that connection with the side plane of the ground rod in contact with the earth. It's important. You need that connection. If you lay it in a trench, it's assuming that it's going to be compacted. Gravity does wonders. If you put it in the ground, just stick it in the ground next to the foundation where they haven't backfilled yet, then what happens is it's going to have gaps in it, voids in it. It's not going to compress the soil, and that's not what the code tells us we can do. Okay. Will it work? Probably will work, but again, code is code. And there's our answer, 250.66a. And we spent a good little lesson on that, trying to learn the different ways for the electrodes.
Hey, Paul.
All right. Yes, sir.
So remember you said like from the panel to the ground rod, then to the next ground rod? And
Yes.
then from there we can go like the gas pipe or whatever, or we're not allowed to do that?
Okay, so if
Or
you look at the
supplemental.
code, so first of all, if you go to the ground rod, so let's assume your building has no electrodes. Chances are it's probably going to have something, right? It's going to have either a concrete encased electrode, rebar in the footer, in contact with the earth, 20 feet. You're probably going to have that. If you have that, you don't need any other electrode. If you have the ground rod and you have the one ground rod and you add a second ground rod, that's all you need. If you don't have any other electrodes there, you don't have anything to do with them. Now, that phrase that we talked about in your example is if you go back and look at 250.66a. Now look at that portion in there that says, it says, if the grounding electroconductor or bonding jumper connected to a single or multiple rods, pipe, or plate electrodes, or any combination thereof, as described in 250.52a5 or a7, which deals with rods, pipes, and then a7 deals with plates, says, listen to this, does not extend on to other types of electrodes that require a larger size conductor. So I could not go with the 6 gauge to the ground rod, to the other ground rod, and then go down to a concrete encased electrode, because you're required to have, if you look below that, you're required to have at least a 4 gauge to a concrete encased electrode. So I wouldn't be able to use the 6 on those ground rods because I'm going from those rods to another electrode that required a bigger grounding electrode conductor. Now, could I go from the panel to the ground rods with a 4 gauge and then continue on, let's say, and bond it to a grounding to a concrete encased electrode? The answer would be yes. You're allowed to daisy chain. But you can't go smaller and then try to go up in size. You can go larger and go down if you want.
If it's the gas pipe, it can be 6.
Now, gas pipes can't be used as a grounding electrode, period. You can't use gas pipes at all for grounding electrode. That's bonding. If you're bonding the gas line because it's likely to be energized, then that's different than what we're talking about here when it comes to grounding electrode conductors for the grounding electrode system. You can't use a gas line as an electrode. And that tells you in 250.50, no, not 250.50, let's see, not permitted. 250.52b, it says not permitted for use as electrodes. And you'll see that the first one says metal underground gas piping systems they're not to be used. So that's a bonding thing, and that's a totally different thing. And you base the size to that based on the size of the ungrounded conductors that could energize that gas line. Usually, you just use the equipment grounded conductor for whatever system that's connected or interconnected. So that would be for that you need to look at 250-104 for that. But that wouldn't be what we're working on. Okay, so don't ever connect a gas piping to have anything to do with electrodes and grounding electrode systems. They have nothing to do with that. You with me?
Thank you.
Yep. Now bonding 250-104. That's where you want to look for that. And usually it's the equipment ground with the circuit that is likely to energize it. Usually is all that's necessary to bond that anyway. But you'll have some inspectors around the country who want you to run something totally separate. And it's not unheard of to have an AHJ say, well, what's the size of your service? 200 amp. What's the size of your conductors? 4-aught aluminum. Okay. Okay. All right. So that's the circuit they'll want you to size it based on what the rating would be of the 200 amp. And that's not the real approach that they should be using. It's based on the gas line, what is likely to energize it. And the only thing that's likely to energize a gas line is any type of appliance that commingles with gas and electric. And if that's the case, it's got an equipment grounding conductor with it that should meet the allowances of 250-104. Which incidentally, next week on Tuesday, we'll be ending up my grounding and bonding webinar for those that are the members. And we will be tackling all those pieces at the end there. So that's going to be a busy night, probably going to be 3 hours at least for me to try to finish what we've done. That's part 4. That's the last session. So, all right, let's answer this question. We have a given. Well, this last question for tonight. We have a given. And of course, I'll ask if you have any Fast Trax stuff that we'll go over. A given, a junction box to be installed will contain the following. Okay. Uh-oh. Looks like we're going to have to do some calculation here. All right. 3 size 6 AWG, which consists of 1 grounded and 2 ungrounded conductors. 1 size 8 AWG equipment grounding conductor. It's got 2 internal clamps. So this looks like this is what is this? 6'3" with ground is what it looks like, right? 6'3" with ground. And then you got 2 internal clamps. I got 1 pigtail for whatever that would be worth. Let's say that's the pigtail from the box. Let's say over to the device or something. But it doesn't say I got a device in this box. It's just a junction box. Quiet, dog. All right. Determine the minimum size junction box in cubic inches the NEC requires. Okay, it's a good one. All right, so where do we want to go first? Somebody tell me. So the key thing here is what?
Box fill.
We're going to do a box fill. Absolutely. So we could go to the back of the code book and probably look up box fill. If there's anything under box, most of y'all have been through the course. You know that what article deals with boxes?
314.
314. Absolutely. But you do have boxes now in your index. And if I look through here just for craps and giggles, you'll notice that it says fill calculations, 314.16b. Okay. Helpful, because everybody by now should remember that you have 2 tables in 314.16. You have a table A, a table B. A for metal boxes, B for this, but those boxes, we're not given those variables here. We're given the impression that we're going to have to do a calculation to get a cubic inch value, right? So let's go to 314.16b. All right, so well, I guess even before we do B, we probably need to look at the pieces, right, of what's going to be in the box. So let's go to 314.16 in general and just look at and see how we get to where we need to be. So 314.16, which is on page 183, it starts out by saying the number of conductors and outlet devices and junction boxes and conduit bodies. It says boxes and conduit bodies shall be of an approved size to provide free space for all enclosed conductors. Okay, makes sense. It says in no case shall the volume of the box as calculated in 314.16a be less than the fill calculations as calculated in 314.16b. So A is going to give us the method. B is going to give us the cubic inch values that we have, and we're going to put the two pieces together. Okay. It says the minimum volume, of course, conduit body, we're not looking at, that's not in our question. This junction box. Okay, so 314.16a gives us the directions, and it says the volume of the wiring enclosure box shall be the total volume of the assembled sections and, where used, the space provided by plaster rings, domes, covers, extension rings, and so forth. So you can get extra cubic inches by using a dome or cover or raised cover as long as it's stamped with its cubic inch on it. Okay, it gets you some little extra volume there. It says where a box is provided with one or more securely installed barriers, that's the barriers that separates maybe from low voltage and high voltage or something inside of a box, or low voltage and low voltage maybe. It says where you have those interior dividers, it gives us some volumes that we have to account for. That's not really in our question. It doesn't ask that, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, number one, A1 is talking about standard boxes. It says the volume of standard boxes that are not marked with their volume shall be given in table 314.16a, standard boxes. Now, one thing about this question, it did not give us box choices, right? It just gives us answers with cubic inches, right? So we're going to look at that. And so we're going to end up using B, 314.16b. If you look at the top right on this page, 183, and I don't know what it is in the 2017 code. I don't know if it's the same number, but it's right there at 314.16b. It says the volumes in paragraph 314.16b1 through b8, as applicable, shall be added together. No allowances shall be required for small fittings such as lock nuts and bushings. So you don't have to account for lock nuts, no account for bushings. You don't have to account for wire nuts, or I should say wire binding devices, so I don't get sued by Ideal. But again, I'm giving them a promotional plug, so maybe they should send the check to me. All right, next is each space within a box installed with a barrier shall be calculated separately. That means if I have two separate spaces and the barrier's in there, then I'm going to calculate the volume of each separate space. Okay, so the barriers break up the spaces, and you calculate each space individually. Okay, all right, so in our case, conductors. So B1, and there's the clamp fill and the support fill, that's the hickeys, and we don't have any of those, and we know devices in this. So the only ones that we're going to deal with is B1 and B2, because we have clamps. Pigtails we don't have to worry about, because that'll tell you in B1 that we don't have to worry about that. And I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. And there's only one equipment grounding conductor in there, so we're fine with B5, which says where there's up to 4 equipment grounds, the equipment bonding or bonding jumpers enter a box a single volume allowance in accordance with 314.16b. So we're not over 4, so we don't have to worry about any of that crap. So all we got to worry about is B1, B2, and B5. That looks like that's all we're going to be working on. And we're going to use the table. So let's get our piece of paper handy. And you might have already done it. But we've got 3 6s. Okay. So if we go over here to the table 314.16b, and we're looking at 6s, 3 6s, there are 5 cubic inches a piece. So I'm doing 5.00, and there's 3 of them times 3. And then I got 1/8. And that one is 3.00. So I got 3.00 times 1. And okay, so, and then I've got 2 internal clamps. Okay, so the conductors were easy. So let's look real quick at clamps. B2, what does it say? Where 1 or more internal cable clamps, either factory or field supplied, are present in the box, a single volume allowance in accordance with 314.16b shall be made based on the largest conductor present in the box. No allowance shall be required for a cable connector with its clamp mechanism outside the box. So if your clamp is like, you've seen those non-metallic sheath cable clamps. If the clamping part, the screws and the binding, if that's on the outside of the box, then that wouldn't count. Okay. We're talking about what's inside the box. So it says use the largest conductor. So we're going to go over here and you see where I said 5.00 for that 6 gauge because we had 3 of them. Well, we're going to make that 3. We're going to cross it out and make that a 4. Because that is the largest conductor in the box. So then we're going to act like we got 4 of them now. All right, so we've taken care of the clamp. Now that pigtail, you're saying, okay, do we have to do anything with the pigtail? Well, B1 says, each conductor that originates outside the box and terminates or is spliced within the box shall be counted once. Right? So this conductor is a pigtail. It didn't originate outside of the box. It originated in the box. So you don't count the pigtails, right? All right. So what do we got here? So we've got 5.00, which is the cubic inch for a 6 gauge. We had 3 of them. And since we had a clamp, it says it has a what? It says a single volume for the largest conductor. Well, that single volume was a 5.00 for the 6. So basically that means you got theoretically 4 6s in there, one of those being the clamp. So that's 4 of those. So 5.00 times 4 is 20. And then you've got the last remaining 8 gauge, and that is 3.00. So you take the 20 plus 3.00 with a total of 23 cubic inches. So the minimum size would be 23 cubic inches. Probably going to be larger than that because that's an oddball size. But again, anybody have any questions on that?
Yeah, hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Why are you counting the other equipment grounding conductor? Didn't we only have to count when we have 4 or more?
No.
Or
When you
because
have
it's
when you
different
have you only have 1 volume up to 4. Right? Read what it says. It says we're up to 4 equipment grounding conductors. Now I'm reading at now again, I don't know what cycle you may be in. Okay? Because this is in the 2020.
Yeah.
So you're in the 2020?
Yes.
Okay, good. So it says we're up to 4 equipment grounding conductors or equipment binding jumpers enter a box, a single volume. So since we only had 1 equipment grounding conductor, we take a single volume. In fact, I only have to take a single volume all the way up to 4 of them. But if I had 4 of them in the box, I'd still only have to take 1 single volume for that equipment grounding conductor. And you base it on what's given. And here, it says it has 1 size 8 equipment grounding conductor.
Yeah, but then when on the first one we got 1 grounded on the 6th.
Yeah, but the 1 ground, yeah, but I counted those in the 6. Remember, I had 3 6s, and then I used the clamps, which only have to take 1 volume, and I added that to that.
Hey, Paul, I think he's talking about the difference between grounded and grounding.
What's the difference? This is not an equipment ground, so this just treats this for as far as volume, it's treated the same. It doesn't matter whether it's grounded or ungrounded. Grounded. So would it help you if I didn't say grounded? Would it help you if I said neutral?
He was right. It was reading 1 grounding, but it's grounded. Yeah.
Okay. So before we choose this answer, though, because we got some answers here, let's look at one other thing here. Let's look at this. So when it talks about B5. Let's read it closely. It says we're up to 4 equipment grounding conductors or equipment bonding jumpers into the box. A single volume allowance in accordance with table 314.16b shall be based on the largest equipment grounding conductor. So on an exam, maybe they give you instead of 23, maybe they give you maybe one of the answers would be 5.00 times 5. So you've got the 3 for the 6 and then 1 for the clamps. And then maybe they're afraid you're not going to read that entire sentence for equipment grounds, and you think that it has to be based on the largest conductor that enters the box. And somebody goes, oh, well, crap, this is an 8, but the largest conductor that enters the box is a 6. So it's got to be the largest volume. So this would, instead of this being 3 plus this clamp is one more volume count. I've got to add one more for the 6 is largest for the equipment ground. But you have to read the whole thing to see that it's based on the largest equipment ground that enters the box, which in this case was only an 8. So it's a 5 cubic inch for the 1 grounded conductor. It's a 5 cubic inch each for the 2 ungrounded conductors. So that's 15 overall. You got the clamp. We looked at it. All clamps just count as 1 volume count. So that's 5. So you had, and it's based on the largest conductor in the box. So that's 5. That's 10. That's 15. And then you've got this one, which is the, well, that's 5, 10, 15. That's 20. And then you've got this one, which is 3. That's how you get to 23. So this only becomes a problem when you start getting more than 4. Then you're going to have to add a quarter volume. So it's a quarter of the volume. So again, if it was let me go on and clear that up for people too. So if you're looking at, let's say that it was, just for craps and giggles, just for a lesson, folks. What if we had 5 8 equipment grounded conductors in there? 5 8 gauge. Well, 4 would be 1 volume count, right? Which is 3.00, right? The quarter volume, if you read it, for those who are in the 2020, it says a quarter volume allowance shall be made for each additional equipment grounded conductor that enters the box based on the largest equipment grounded conductor. So you basically a quarter volume of whatever that value is. In this case, we used 8 gauge. So it's 3.00. Okay. And a quarter of that.
25.
20, yeah, so 1.25, right? Or 75. Is that 70.75, isn't it? Help me out, guys. What's a quarter of 3?
0.75.
It's for a 1 quarter, not a third, 1 quarter of it. So that'd be what?
0.25.
So take your 3, which is 3.00, right? Times 25%, 0.75, isn't it? If I take 0.75 and I do that times 4, isn't that 3? So 0.75 is a quarter volume. So the answer would be 3.75 would be the volume for 5 equipment grounded conductors. Remember, it's 1 quarter of the 3.00. Okay, it's a quarter of the volume allowance. It's not 0.25, a quarter. It's 1 quarter of the volume allowance. So if the volume allowance is 3.00, then a quarter of that, which is what? 25%, right? Is 0.75. So the volume would be 3.75 if I had 5 number 8 equipment grounded conductors. Does that make sense? All we're trying to do is add a quarter volume. And it's a quarter of the volume of the largest equipment grounded conductor in the box. In this case, they were all 8 gauge. What was that?
Can you please repeat it? Because I always was thinking that we gotta add 0.25.
No, it's not. It says, read what it says slowly. Let's read it again. It says a quarter volume allowance. It's a quarter of the volume allowance. If the volume allowance is 3.00 for that conductor, then you have to calculate what is the quarter, okay? Or 1/4 of that volume allowance, okay? Or 1 quarter of that volume allowance. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Get off my damn calculator. Hold on for a second. My numbers, my thing's stuck. Damn it. Hello? Wow, that's
So you did 3
Hold
times
on.
1.25?
Hold on. I can't get the daggone thing off the. Yeah. So anyway, sorry. So easiest way to, there we go. So easiest way to do it is to convert. So take that 1/4, divide the 1 into 4.
0.25.
Okay, so you get the 0.25. So that is your quarter of. So you take 3.00 times 0.25, and that's how you got 0.75. That's a quarter of 3. And the one way to know that is if you take 0.75 times 4, that's 3. So you're trying to find the quarter volume of it, okay? Which is the 1/4. 4 being a whole, 1/4 being a quarter of it. So it's a 4th volume, okay? All right.
There is a question like this on the exam, and I think I messed it up on this one.
Yeah, you know, I think that it would be probably low hanging fruit for, let's go on and resolve it real quick. I think it would be, see, this will work it out. Oh, well, this one doesn't work it out because it doesn't show you the 1/4. So basically you're getting 1/4 of the value. But remember, we always tell you to convert a fraction into the decimals because it's easier to work. If we work in 3.00 and we need to work a fraction, we want to take the 1 and divide it into 4. And we want to break it down. So that equals 0.25, right? Which equates. So the 0.25 is the quarter. So you're trying to account for the quarter of the volume to add it to it. If the volume is 3.00 times 0.25, a quarter of value to 3 is 0.75. So that's basically what you're doing. I guess you could take 3.00 and divide it by 4 in the same way, and that's 0.75. You can do that as well. If that helps you out. Okay. So anyway, this is what we came 23. So here's how we got the 2 for the 6 ungrounded. Yep. And we got the 1 for the grounded. Yep. And we got the 1 for the equipment ground. 3. Yep. And we got the clamps count as 1. Yep. And it's based on the largest conductor. Yep. That was that. There's the pigtail, which counts for Zippo. Out of the way it's going, eventually they're going to try to account for it because somebody's going to argue that it does take up space. But the moment that somebody starts doing that in the code, and I don't think we have anything in 2023 to do this, but the moment they start doing this, now people are going to say, well, don't those wire nuts take up volume? And then we're going to end up going down this road because everybody says, really? You're going to make me account for an equipment ground? For years, we never account. We could have 50 equipment grounds in there and only counted as 1 conductor in the past. And people argued that that's okay. But now we have to account for that quarter volume for each additional equipment ground over 4. Well, can't you see that eventually somebody might say, well, don't wire nuts take up space? Doesn't those jumpers take up space? And we need to account for those. We already did that with the dividers. They take up a certain space. Let's hope we don't go down that road anytime soon. I'm certainly hope we don't. All right. I'm going to stop sharing and bring it back. And we had, wow, the room cleared out, man. We started out with, with the Jay dropped out early on baby duty and everything. I guess I knew Schwartzy would always be there. So, all right. So any questions on any of the Fast Trax stuff that you encountered? I'm going to end the stream over on the stream for everybody out there that's been watching along over on the stream. You want to be involved in how we do this? That's what we cover in the program. And if you want to be a part of it and join us and ask questions and dissect and whatnot, and it's way deeper than this, then there you go. Oh, you had it. He had it. I should just looked at O. And, I tried to give you 2 different ways to come up with that quarter volume calculation. But anyway, if you want to get into the Fast Trax program, there you go. It's available now. And again, it's expanding. So if you haven't joined it, look for a change in 2022. It's going to be called the Black program, the base program. There's a green, there's a red, there's just so many colors. Don't worry, we'll have tutorials on it explaining it. If you want to go down a residential path, there you go. All right, so I'm going to end the stream. For those folks over there online, appreciate all of you streaming with us. Hopefully you got something out of it. Until next time, folks, stay safe. God bless. All of y'all stay in our chat for our program, and we'll continue on.